A large army was pressing on the border, about to attack the city gates. Inside the palace walls, eunuchs and palace maids were in a panic, scattering in all directions. Luanji wanted to dismiss the servants in the imperial study, but the old servant in the lead knelt on the ground, refusing to leave, vowing to serve him until the very last moment. Just then, a guard rushed in to report that the enemy army had reached the imperial city, but strangely, they had not breached the gates. The guard hesitantly told Luanji that the enemy leader was the crown prince of the rival state, Muku. This man promised not to slaughter the citizens in the city, but if the imperial family's lives were to be spared, Luanji must wear a red wedding dress and personally open the city gates to surrender. Hearing this, Luanji was furious, cursing that bastard for being too outrageous. He then tied on a white mourning band, preparing to defend the nation's gates to the death. Since the enemy wanted to see a red wedding dress, he would dye it red with his own blood. Outside the east gate, the enemy army stood in formation, led by none other than Muku. Luanji ascended the city wall and questioned why the other man was humiliating him. Unexpectedly, the other man mocked him for wearing mourning clothes. Luanji gritted his teeth in anger and prepared to climb the high wall to leap to his death, splattering his blood on the spot. This posture wiped the smile right off Muku's face. He threatened that if Luanji dared to jump, he would have the entire imperial family of Yun slaughtered. This move was indeed effective. Luanji did not dare to act rashly again and could only point at that bastard, the chancellor, and curse him loudly. Muku breathed a sigh of relief and urged him to come down and talk. But Luanji wouldn't listen at all, genuinely worried that he was in danger at such a height. Muku leaped up, flew onto the city wall, and carried Luanji down in his arms. The Emperor of Yin clung tightly to Muku's neck, not even daring to open his eyes, clearly terrified of death. Only when he was safely on the ground did he awkwardly jump out of the other's embrace. Luanji agreed to open the gates and surrender, but demanded to make a treaty with him. Muku believed he no longer had any bargaining chips, but thought there was no harm in listening. The conditions Luanji proposed were simply that the common people and the imperial family must not be harmed. Muku felt helpless. It turned out that in the other's eyes, he was a tyrant who delighted in slaughtering cities. Without another word, he hoisted the other man onto his shoulder and walked into the city, promising that as long as Luanji was obedient, he would not harm anyone. Luanji, now a minister of a defeated nation, came to pay his respects to the crown prince of the rival state with a false kowtow. Muku hadn't wanted to force him, but this man had a stubborn backbone and, swallowing his dignity, knelt down. He had come to plead for the people of his fallen kingdom. At the thought of his suffering people, Luanji couldn't help but burst into tears. Muku, unable to bear it, walked over and stroked his hair to soothe him. Luanji subconsciously slapped his arm away, but remembering his situation, he had no choice but to apologize. Muku asked Nji what was troubling him. The ambiguous and playful attitude disgusted Nji, but for the sake of his people, he could only endure it. He stated frankly that the first year's tribute was too much. The people needed time to recover. Unexpectedly, Muku agreed without hesitation to cut it in half, but with a condition. He wanted one person from the state of Yin. This person was not some peerless beauty, but Luanji himself. He wanted Luanji as a slave and a pet, to return with him to the rival state. How could the monarch of a fallen kingdom endure such humiliation? He was about to resist, but was held down firmly by the other man. Muku issued a harsh ultimatum. He could choose to obediently return with him, or let his people toil for the annual tribute. The choice was his alone. Muku pinned Luanji down, forcing him to choose. Thinking of his people, Nji could only stop resisting. He said that he was dull and forgetful and would only cause trouble. Muku thought his memory was indeed poor. Otherwise, he wouldn't have forgotten the time years ago when Muku gave him his personal dice. Luanji truly didn't remember when he had ever crossed paths with a man before him. Muku was a little disappointed, thinking the other man simply hadn't taken it to heart. Since he couldn't win his heart, he might as well use the annual tribute as leverage to force him to submit. Luanji was furious, but knew the other man wouldn't change his mind. Thinking of the suffering people of Yun, he compromised. He agreed to go with him, but he couldn't let go of Yun. Muku had already thought of everything. The rival state would infect his younger brother as a vassal king to govern Yin. Moreover, the rival state would also treat the people of Yin well. The thought of Mu-Ke using his people as leverage filled Luan-Ji with disgust, and he subconsciously pulled his hand away. This angered Mu-Ke. He grabbed Luan-Ji by the nape of his neck, warning him to be mindful of his status. Luan-Ji could only obediently submit. Satisfied, Mu-Ke hugged him and kissed his hair. For the sake of Yun, and Ji could only endure it. The two rested for a night, and the next day, the army began its journey back to the capital. The carriage jolted along the road. Luan-Ji, trying to suppress his discomfort, sighed constantly. He was worried that his younger brother, being timid and cowardly, would be bullied by the envoys of the rival state. Mu-Ke wanted him to drink some tea to ease his discomfort, but the other man didn't appreciate the gesture and petulantly turned his head away. In Mu-Ke's eyes, he was just throwing a little tantrum. Unable to refuse, Ji took the tea and apologized. While watching him drink, Mu-Ke mentioned his courtesy name. Ji was a bit surprised and only praised the other's good memory. As the two were chatting, the carriage was suddenly jolted by a loose stone. Ji fell directly into Mu-Ke's arms. Due to the violent shaking, he couldn't hold in and threw up all over Mu-Ke. The noble crown prince was not disgusted. Instead, he held him even tighter and even started teasing him. Luan-Ji explained that it wasn't intentional, but he couldn't stop retching. He thought to himself, if this could make the arrogant prince disgusted with him, that would be good too. Seeing this, Mu-Ke ordered the carriage to stop and had his servants prepare ginger soup and clean clothes. Ji was a bit bewildered by this, and then the other man gently comforted him. Although Ji was cursing him in his heart, his cheeks reddened involuntarily. Mu-Ke teased him for being delicate, and Ji stubbornly denied it. The arrogant prince didn't get angry and just went along with him. He even thoughtfully wiped the stain from the corner of his mouth. Ji was stunned for a moment, but then pushed him away, thinking he was just pretending to be a good person. Mu-Ke took the opportunity to use his status as a slave and pet, telling him to serve him. He then unfastened his robe, and Ji was startled, thinking the other man was about to make a move on him. Mu-Ke was speechless, not expecting Ji to think of him that way. He pulled him closer and explained he just needed help changing his clothes. Afraid that this guy would do something even more unreasonable, Ji agreed to help him change. But his dawdling manner made Mu-Ke a little impatient. He couldn't help but tease Ji. The two of them scuffled. In a moment of carelessness, Ji completely stripped Mu-Ke's clothes off, outside the carriage. The marching soldiers whispered about that precious person who was doted on in 1,000 ways. They were supposed to return to the court with the army as quickly as possible, but the crown prince had slowed down the march for him. More than 10 days later, the army arrived at the capital of the rival state. Inside the carriage, Ji was too uncomfortable to even sit up. Mu-Ke, his heart aching, massaged his head, telling him to just hold on until they reached the palace. As he was speaking, a guard announced that they had arrived at the Xuanwu Gate. Ji thought this guy was taking him into the imperial palace to pry state secrets of Yin from him. He swore an oath that he would never yield. Mu-Ke was thoroughly exasperated by him. He pulled the other man out of the carriage and told him he wasn't interested in his so-called state secrets. The noble crown prince was annoyed that the other man didn't understand his feelings. Luan-Ji looked bewildered, not knowing in what capacity he was entering the imperial palace or where he would live. Mu-Ke deliberately teased him, claiming that if he didn't behave, he would lock the monarch of a fallen kingdom in the dungeon of the Eastern Palace. Luan-Ji couldn't bear it any longer and pointed at him, cursing loudly. Mu-Ke pulled him into his arms, reminding him that he was now just a prisoner. Ji awoke, as if from a dream, and said no more. The two returned to the main hall of the Eastern Palace. Luan-Ji looked around, secretly marveling at the wealth of the rival state, and couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Mu-Ke planned for him to live with him from now on, and had specially arranged for the hall to be very warm. Ji thought the phrase, as a slave and a pet, meant he was to be a personal servant, and immediately stated he was unwilling to live with Mu-Ke. But this was no longer Yun. He couldn't do as he pleased. Mu-Ke, with great patience, warned him again not to talk back. Then, he thoughtfully poured him a cup of tea. But Ji didn't appreciate it and knocked the teacup over. This time, he had truly angered Mu-Ke. Neither was willing to back down, and the atmosphere became extremely tense. The domineering crown prince pinned the monarch of the fallen kingdom against the wall and reached out to remove his clothes. Ji was terrified by this action. He was also a man. This guy must be blind or crazy. Muku gave a wicked, charming smile and confessed that he didn't like women. Only Ji, the number one beauty of Yun, interested him the most. He then pulled off the other's belt and its ornaments, and a jade pendant fell to the ground. Ji struggled fiercely, stomped hard on the bastard's foot, and fled in a panic. Muka picked up the jade pendant and looked at it thoughtfully for a moment. Ji was shocked to see the exquisite dice in Muku's hand. That was clearly his. He shouted as he reached out, trying to snatch the exquisite dice back. Muku was not flustered at all and hid the exquisite dice behind his back, thinking he still remembered the past. Years ago, it was Muku who had given him the exquisite dice and vowed to come back for him. He, too, had held the exquisite dice and, with a smile, promised to wait for Muku. Muku pulled him over, leaned close to his ear, and asked him why he kept the exquisite dice with him. He struggled to break free, feeling it was none of Muku's business, and demanded he return his things immediately. Muku smiled contemptuously, leaned in front of him, and asked if he had forgotten who gave him the exquisite dice. He stumbled back a few steps in fright, explaining that the exquisite dice were chosen by a matron from the storeroom to match his clothes. Unexpectedly, upon hearing this, Muku flew into a rage and pushed him to the ground. Looking heartbroken, Muku threw the exquisite dice at him. He felt it was all so baffling and shouted, asking Muku what madness had possessed him. Muku just looked down on him, calling him a heartless and disloyal person. He then ordered him to be locked in the dungeon, saying he didn't want to see him for a while. Before Ji could resist, he, with his clothes disheveled, was lifted up by two palace attendants. Just as he was about to be taken away, Muku suddenly called a halt. Muku took off his own outer robe and draped it over Ji. Then he turned his back, waved his hand, and had Ji taken away. Ji felt this was clearly a carrot-and-stick approach, but his mouth said no while his body was honest, and he clutched the robe tightly. The dungeon was dark and sunless, but at least he had rats and cockroaches for company. Unfortunately, Ji was afraid of everything, so for him, this was a form of torture. Two prison guards nearby were drinking happily, and the cheerful noise grated on his ears. He called out to them and asked if Muku had taken the wrong medicine as a child to be so moody and unpredictable. The prison guards immediately slammed their cups down to defend Muku, threatening to smash Ji's mouth if he dared to slander Muku again. He wasn't scared at all and even blurted out that Muku was a cut sleeve. The prison guards were thoroughly enraged and wanted to execute him on the spot, but were fortunately stopped by their companion. Ji suddenly fell into deep thought, not understanding why Muku would get so angry at him over a small pendant. He couldn't help but think that it would be nice to get away from Muku if he had the chance, but he was still worried about his people in Yun. At this time, Muku's father had also heard that Muku had brought Ji, the son of Heaven of Yun, back to the rival state. Hearing that Ji was a rare beauty, the father couldn't help but suspect his own son was a cut sleeve. Muku explained that he and Ji just had some old scores to settle and told his father not to overthink it. Seeing that Muku had it under control, his father didn't press the matter and asked if Muku had settled Ji in the Eastern Palace. Muku only said he was going to lock Ji in the dungeon for a few days to break his spirit, but in his heart, he was already thinking about going to see him. Muku walked into the dungeon. He secretly guessed that Ji must still be throwing a tantrum. Sure enough, Ji was sitting in a corner, completely ignoring the food beside him. Muku asked him why he wasn't eating. Even if he was on a hunger strike, he should at least consider the imperial family of Yun. But he just turned his head away and explained he wasn't hungry. The next second, his stomach growled in protest, causing the son of Heaven of Yun to lose all face. Not expecting to witness such an embarrassing moment, Muku couldn't help but laugh. Ji clutched his protesting stomach, both angry and ashamed, and demanded to know what Muku was laughing at. He felt that not only was Muku not letting him die, but he was also humiliating him with terrible food. It was utterly heartless. To preserve the dignity of his Yun imperial family, he would rather starve to death than eat this food. Hearing this, Muka didn't get angry and even promised him the crown prince's standard meals from now on. He then took the opportunity to tell Muku that he preferred light-flavored food. Muku, who had been affectionately pinching his cheek, suddenly squeezed harder, warning him not to push his luck. He slapped Muku's hand away and demanded that Muku arrange for a young servant to clean the dungeon. He also complained that the straw on the bed was impossible to sleep on. As he was pointing and criticizing the dungeon, an oblivious cricket suddenly flew onto his hand. He screamed and frantically shook his hand. After successfully getting rid of the cricket, he immediately threw himself into Muku's arms, wanting Muku to stand up for him. To defend his love, Muku flicked the cricket 2.5 meters away. Then he immediately started to soothe Luan-Ji, not expecting that the dignified monarch of a nation would be afraid of insects. Looking at the now-dead cricket on the ground, Luan-Ji exclaimed, "So powerful." The next second, Muku pressed his forehead against his and asked, "Who's so powerful?" Only then did he realize he was still in Muku's arms. He got scared and quickly backed away 2.5 meters. He cleared his throat and used the poor conditions of the dungeon as an excuse to cover his embarrassment. Muku asked irritably if he still remembered what his status was now. Mentioning his status, he naturally felt a bit guilty and instantly accepted his current situation. Muku sighed. Although he felt helpless, he quickly summoned people. Immediately, maids brought in a continuous stream of delicacies. Not only that, the entire dungeon was completely transformed, with no shortage of ornate screens and chairs. Faced with this level of cuisine and treatment, Luan-Ji's heart bloomed with joy. Muku held a wine cup and asked if he was satisfied with the renovated dungeon and the food. He shrugged arrogantly, saying it was just barely acceptable. Seeing the food on the table swept clean by him, Muku concluded that their tastes were similar. He blushed a little, stammered that he was going to sleep, and asked Muku to leave. But Muku had no intention of leaving. He suddenly asked if he remembered what happened 3 years ago. He tried hard to recall 3 years ago, but only remembered the severe floods in Yun and the people's struggle for food. Muku had no interest in hearing about his country's politics. He just couldn't believe that he really didn't remember their promise. Luan-Ji explained that he didn't remember much from 3 years ago, but he did remember meeting him at the grand music ceremony the year before last. Seeing that he couldn't remember, Muku decided not to let him out and told him to stay in the dungeon. He watched Muku's departing figure, feeling that the other man was being inexplicably strange. He rested his chin in his hand and thought, quite certain that he had only met Muku at the grand music ceremony. At that time, he was trying to take down a lantern from a tree, but just couldn't reach it. Muku suddenly patted him from behind, called him Xiao Xiao, and said he had been looking for him for a long time before finally finding him in the Imperial Garden. He wanted to pull him along to have some fun, since it was rare for them to meet. He pushed Muku's hand away, not understanding why the other man would casually use his pet name. The other man's eyes were filled with confusion and disappointment as he asked if he didn't recognize him anymore. He just smiled. Of course, he recognized Muku. After all, he was the crown prince of the rival state. But Muku's expression suddenly darkened. He couldn't believe that after only a year, Luan-Ji had forgotten him. He laughed mockingly, feeling that it had all been his own wishful thinking. Luan-Ji had no strong impression of Muku, yet the other man acted as if they were very close. The thought of it gave him a headache. He suddenly thought of the exquisite dice for which Muku had thrown him into the dungeon. He took the exquisite dice in his hand and fiddled with it, discovering that the character Ku was carved on the red bean. Seeing the character Ku on the red bean, he immediately associated it with Muku. But he quickly dismissed his own guess, thinking such a coincidence was impossible. Thinking about this made his head hurt even more, and he trembled all over. An image of him and Muku leaning against each other under a peach blossom tree flashed through his mind. Before he could think about it in detail, he fainted in the dungeon. When he woke up, he was already lying on the bed in the Eastern Palace. He clutched his head, intermittently mumbling that he was hot. Muku heartlessly tucked his hand back under the covers, telling him to get up, drink his medicine, and then go back to sleep. Looking at the bowl of bitter-smelling medicine, he felt a bit troubled. He happened to dislike sweets and couldn't eat candied fruit. But Muku promised him that once he recovered, he could eat whatever he wanted. Seeing him unmoved, Muku offered to share the bowl of medicine with him. He was still hesitating, so Muku said he would feed him the medicine mouth to mouth. Terrified, he quickly gulped down the medicine in one go and ordered Muku never to mention the mouth-to-mouth thing again. Muku handed him a bowl of plain congee, reminding him to rinse his mouth with it, and asked from the side how the kanji tasted, remembering that he liked light-flavored food. The next second, he spat the kanji out, complaining that the cooks in the Eastern Palace were terrible and the kanji wasn't even cooked. Terrible and not cooked were like two knives, stabbing Mu-ku's heart with every word. A palace attendant rebuked Luan-ji for his audacity, since this was personally cooked by the crown prince. Before he could finish, Mu-ku cut him off. Luan-ji, having heard only half of it, thought the kanji contained some precious ingredient that he had wasted. Soon, he was pushed back into the bed by Mu-ku and forced to rest. He clutched the corner of Mu-ku's sleeve and thanked him, feeling that the other man wasn't so terrible after all. This was the first time recently that Luan-ji had voluntarily gotten close to Mu-ku, which made Mu-ku uncontrollably want to touch him a little more. While Luan-ji was sound asleep, Mu-ku leaned down towards him. Luan-ji spent a peaceful night in Mu-ku's arms. When he opened his eyes and saw Mu-ku's face, he was truly startled. Mu-ku stroked his head and said, "Morning." Frightened, he immediately sat up in bed and even backed away several steps. As a result, he accidentally slipped and almost fell off the bed. Fortunately, Mu-ku reacted quickly and pulled him back into his arms. He quickly struggled out of Mu-ku's embrace, stammering for a long time without being able to form a complete sentence. Mu-ku also sat up, saying he had a fever again last night and couldn't be woken up no matter what. He then very naturally touched his forehead, remarking that the fever had finally gone down. Then he pushed him back into the bed, telling him to cover himself well and not catch a cold again. He cursed Mu-ku for being despicable, taking advantage of his illness to make a move on him at such a time. Mu-ku nearly ground his back teeth to dust. When had he ever taken advantage of someone's predicament? Luan-ji immediately accused Mu-ku of sleeping in his bed, and with his clothes in disarray, it was clear that something had already happened between them. Mu-ku suspected he had never taken a concubine. He immediately explained that he was only 20 years old and his health had been poor in previous years. Before he could finish, Mu-ku leaned in closer and kissed his forehead. He immediately blushed, covering his forehead and stammering for a long time. Mu-ku lifted his hair and said he was very happy. This angered Luan-ji so much that he sat up in bed, shouting Mu-ku's name. Mu-ku told him that nothing happened last night. After all, he was delirious with fever. To make a move on him then would have been worse than a beast. But now that his fever was down, if he wanted to experience some of the fun, Mu-ku would be more than happy to oblige. Luan-ji immediately clutched his clothes, furiously saying he didn't want to experience it. Mu-ku stroked his head, comforting him that since the fever was gone, he should get up and eat something first. He was about to agree, but then he remembered Mu-ku's unpredictable temper and worried that the other man would lock him in the dungeon again. So he immediately started to feign illness, saying he couldn't get up or get out of bed. Mu-ku saw through his little trick at a glance and said he would personally carry him out of bed. Terrified, he scrambled out of bed at top speed, explaining that he was in perfect health. Unexpectedly, he had used too much force during his performance and suddenly started coughing. Mu-ku poured him a glass of water, telling him there was no need to act. If he didn't like the dungeon, he could stay here again. His eyes immediately sparkled with gratitude as he looked at Mu-ku and apologized to him. While drinking water, he asked where this place was. It turned out to be Mu-ku's bedchamber. Frightened, he spat out the water he had just drunk. Luan-ji wiped his mouth, wondering if it was too late to change his mind and go back to the dungeon. How could you let duck that's already in your mouth fly away? Mu-ku told him not to even think about it. Luan-ji sat on the edge of the bed in a daze. Mu-ku had imprisoned him in the Eastern Palace, yet treated him with courtesy, which truly confused him. A maid brought him his medicine. She reminded him it was time to drink his medicine. Looking at the bitter herbal medicine, he pinched his nose in disgust, planning to drink it later. But making Luan-ji drink the medicine was the crown prince's order, and the maid dared not disobey, so she had to impose on Luan-ji. Luan-ji reluctantly picked up the herbal medicine, not forgetting to complain that Mu-ku was too meddlesome. The maid told him not to say that, as the crown prince had summoned the top imperial physician for him and had stayed up all night watching over him. Luan-ji was a bit stunned after hearing this, not understanding why Mu-ku was so concerned about him. The maid smiled, saying it was of course because the crown prince valued him. The word valued made Luan-ji fall into deep thought. Although Mu-ku had locked him in the dungeon, he had not actually forced him. The maid suddenly called out to him, interrupting his thoughts. Only then did he realize he had been lost in thought. He immediately cleared his throat, thinking that the crown prince seemed quite popular with the maids. The maid suddenly blushed and reminded Lu and Ji to watch his words. Lu and Ji felt there was nothing to blush about. The women of the rival state were shy and reserved, certainly not like the women of his state. Before he could finish, Muku returned and asked him what about discussing women. Muku asked Lu and Ji irritably if he would have flirted with all the maids in his palace if he hadn't come back. Lu and Ji slammed the table in anger, explaining that he had not been flirting with the palace maids. The next second, he suddenly felt guilty. After all, if Muka found out he was gossiping behind his back, the other man would definitely take the opportunity to tease him. He could only go along with it and say that the women of the rival state were too shy, not as bold and generous as the women of Yin. Muka suddenly leaned close to his ear, sarcastically remarking that he had never even touched a woman, but seemed to know a lot about them. Muka thought he liked the bold and generous type, and said that no matter how bold the women of Yin were, they couldn't compare to the men of the rival state. He also reminded him that since he liked the bold and generous type, there was no need to look far. Lu and Ji immediately became anxious, arguing that women and men could not be lumped together, and he did not like men either. Muka suddenly proposed that he go to the Eastern Palace's library the next day to serve as a junior minister. He immediately became arrogant. Without a residence and a monthly salary, he wouldn't work. Muku told Lu and Ji that last month, during the snow disaster in Yun, he had submitted a memorial to the court to allocate 300,000 taels of silver. This 300,000 taels was more than Lu and Ji could ever repay, even if he served as his junior minister for a lifetime. He told Lu and Ji to think it over carefully. He could start his post tomorrow, as long as it was for the people of Yun. Lu and Ji had no reason to refuse. He apologized to Muku, but Muku suddenly moved closer. He felt that Lu and Ji should know that what he wanted was not thanks. Muku placed his hand on Lu and Ji's. The proximity made Lu and Ji blush involuntarily. Lu and Ji told Muku that he was not a cut sleeve and would certainly not serve someone with his body. Muku couldn't help but frown, not expecting the other to think he wanted him as a male concubine. Lu and Ji suddenly distanced himself from Muku, saying he believed Muku would not do something as despicable as forcing others. But if the other man insisted on forcing the issue, as the monarch of a nation, he still had some kingly spirit. Now Muku was getting annoyed, asking if Lu and Ji was threatening him. Lu and Ji was not flustered at all, explaining that it was precisely because he was grateful to Muku that he was willing to be sincere and not deceitful. Unexpectedly, hearing this made Muku even angrier. He directly demoted him to a servant, ordering him to serve tea and water. He didn't argue further, just bowed and apologized. This made Muku even more furious. He couldn't believe Lu and Ji would rather be his servant than accept his feelings. Lu and Ji, however, was thinking that Muku's willingness to be threatened by him might prove that Muku cared about him more than he had imagined. The two of them naturally ended up sleeping in the same bed. But Lu and Ji's sleeping posture was not elegant and annoyed Muku. Muku, both angry and helpless, leaned over, wanting to shake Lu and Ji awake. He wanted Lu and Ji to help him get dressed. Unexpectedly, not only did the other man not get up, but he also kicked him. Caught off guard, he was kicked right out of bed. He clutched his forehead in pain, while Lu and Ji, completely oblivious, rolled over and even slept more soundly. Muku nearly ground his back teeth to dust. He shouted Lu and Ji's name, then furiously grabbed the other's collar, telling him to get up immediately. After all that commotion, the other man finally woke up and even yawned unhurriedly. Lu and Ji, looking like he hadn't woken up properly, greeted him while rubbing his eyes. He immediately spread his hands and ordered Lu and Ji to dress him, reminding him not to forget his status. But the other man, in a daze, picked up a pair of trousers and tried to put them on his head. His face darkened even more. He was about to scold him for something, but before he could finish, the other man fell directly into his arms, drowsily falling asleep again. He even nuzzled against his shoulder before sleeping peacefully. He sighed helplessly. There was nothing to be done. He had to dote on his own man. He then hugged Lu and Ji, pulling him even tighter. Looking at the other's sleeping face, he felt that only when he was asleep would he be willing to stay in his arms. After the morning court session, Muku was still in a daze. He rushed back to the Eastern Palace and asked a palace maid about Lu and Ji's whereabouts. The The palace maid immediately replied that Luigi had gone to the study to organize his memorials. Hearing this news made him instantly happier. He hadn't expected Luigi to be willing to work for him. At that moment, Luigi was sitting at the desk, writing something in a book with a brush. Muka was very pleased to see this. He had thought the other man would take the opportunity to cause trouble now that he had a position, but he was surprisingly obedient. The next second, he saw the other man drawing a turtle on his treasured ancient book. He was instantly furious. He knew the other man was up to no good. He demanded to know why he had to draw on his ancient book when there was perfectly good Xian paper in the bookshelf. Luigi gave Muka a playful wink. He was bored, so he added a little something new to the book for him. But then his expression changed. As a prisoner, with his ancestors watching, how could he possibly work for the crown prince of an enemy state? Muka immediately threatened him, planning to add a little something new to his face as well. He immediately broke into a cold sweat, telling Muka to think twice, as doing such a thing in broad daylight was not wise. Muka pinched his ear, warning him that if he kept this up, he would throw him into the wilderness to be fed to the wolves. He rubbed his ear, thinking that if that really happened, it wouldn't be so bad. Muka was a little angry, but he knew Luigi was provoking him only because he harbored a death wish. He didn't know who it was that had made the other man feel that the monarch of a fallen kingdom must be buried with his country. These words made Luigi pause, and he fell in a deep thought. Before his enthronement, Luigi had said that he believed he would become a wise ruler whose name would be celebrated throughout the history of Yun. He had held Luigi's hand, saying that being a wise ruler wasn't important. Everything was for the people. When the country was on the brink of collapse, Luigi had also held his hand, willing to die with him for their country. Now it seemed that the oaths of the past were just a pipe dream. He didn't even have the right to die for his country. Muka noticed that Luigi was unwilling to even talk about this, and couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He pinched Luigi's face and, picking up a brush, began to draw on his face. The other man immediately demanded to know what he had drawn. He just smiled and said he had drawn a turtle. Luigi clutched his forehead in fury, not knowing that he had actually drawn a pair of mandarin ducks and 2 small flowers. He ordered Luigi to go wash his face, and after washing, he had to come back and grinding for him. Luigi went to wash his face in a huff. He had long heard that the crown prince was vengeful, and now it seemed the rumors were true. After washing his face, he hid behind a screen to peek at Muka. Seeing him seriously reviewing memorials, he thought that if the other man ascended the throne, he would probably be a wise ruler. After being discovered, he obediently ground the ink by his side. While saying that one should fulfill their duties in their position, he was secretly plotting to spill the inkwell on the memorials. Just as he was about to cause trouble, he inadvertently glanced at the content of a memorial. A minister had proposed increasing the taxes on Yun. Muka directly rejected it and forbade the matter from being raised again. Only then did Luigi realize that Muka had been diligently helping his country and people and had not deceived him. He decided to abandon his plan to cause trouble. Just as he was about to thank Muka, he knocked over the teacup on the table. The freshly reviewed memorial was smudged. Muka's expression immediately turned ugly. Luigi also broke into a cold sweat. He hurriedly explained that this time it was truly an accident. Muka was furious and snapped the brush in two. Not only had Luigi drawn a turtle on his ancient book, but he had also ruined an urgent memorial from a court official. He felt it was time to loosen the other's bones a bit. Luigi immediately broke into a cold sweat, hurriedly explaining that this time he really didn't do it on purpose. Muka didn't care whether it was real or fake. He pushed Luigi down onto the desk. Like punishing a child, he spanked the other's bottom, asking irritably if he had come today just to cause trouble for him. Although Luigi had already explained that he was there to help grind ink, he was still spanked by Muka's merciless iron palm. He looked at Muka with teary eyes, crying that his bottom hurt. Muka had never seen such a scene and was stunned. Then he sighed in resignation, feeling that he really owed Luigi. He comforted the other man, saying that if he was still angry, he could draw a few more turtles, but the memorials contained important matters concerning the people and could not be delayed. After speaking, he stroked the other's head again, planning to have someone rewrite the memorial. Watching Muka's departing figure, Luan-ji fell into deep thought. He didn't understand why Mu-ku was so good to him. He sat by the lake, thinking about the exquisite dice. Mu-ku was not one to speak irresponsibly. Something must have happened between them. But 3 years ago, he had a serious illness and couldn't remember many things. Thinking of this, his head started to ache again. The exquisite dice in his hand slipped from his grasp. The exquisite dice fell into the lake with a splash, completely unnoticed. Two palace attendants saw that Luan-ji was unwell and intended to help him back. Learning that the two were sent by Mu-ku to take care of him, he decided to let go of past grievances and return the favor, thanking Mu-ku for showing mercy to Yun. At this point, Luan-ji had not yet noticed that the exquisite dice were missing. The exquisite dice sank to the bottom of the lake. Luan-ji returned to the study and wrote something on a piece of paper. After finishing, he stretched his back. Mu-ku suddenly called out to him loudly. He hadn't expected him to come at this time. He praised the other for being diligent in political affairs, saying the people of the rival state would be fortunate in the future. But he didn't expect the other man to be there to call him to account. The other man held out the exquisite dice in his hand and demanded to know what had happened. Only then did he realize the exquisite dice were missing. He guessed he must have accidentally dropped them in the Imperial Garden. Muku's face was extremely grim as he asked whether he had accidentally dropped it or thrown away. He also lost his temper, asking if the other man had come specifically to call him to account. Muku smiled bitterly, not expecting Luan-ji to hate him to this extent. Luan-ji didn't know what Muku meant by this, but the exquisite dice were his, and how he disposed of them was none of the other's business. Hearing this, Muku became even angrier and raised his hand as if to slap him. But in the end, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He just flicked his sleeve and told Luan-ji to get lost. Luan-ji clearly hadn't expected Muku to get so angry. He didn't know what to say. Muku told him to get out, saying he never wanted to see him again. Luan-ji suddenly started talking tough as well. Get out, then get out. It's not like he cared about living with Muku anyway. Watching his departing figure, Muku suddenly felt a little regretful, but it was too late. Outside, the moon was dark and the wind was high. Luan-ji couldn't help but shiver. Having left the Eastern Palace, where in the vast rival state was there a place for him, he found a random corner and sat down, even composing a poem full of self-pity. Before he could feel sad for 2.5 minutes, he was discovered by the palace staff on night duty. The attendant was greatly alarmed, asking why he was sleeping on the ground, and was about to pull him up. He immediately played pitiful, saying with teary eyes that he was too tired and wanted to sleep a little longer. The attendant then suggested helping him to a side room to sleep, since it would be a while before dawn. Early the next morning, Muku asked about Luan-ji's whereabouts. Learning that Luan-ji had been settled in a side room, he felt a sense of relief. He hadn't expected Luan-ji to be so carefree, able to pull up a blanket and sleep soundly anytime, which made him feel like a clown. Suddenly, he discovered what Luan-ji had written. It was some suggestions regarding his new policies. He hadn't expected the other man to have carefully studied his new policy measures and seriously given him advice. And yet, yesterday, he had waved his hand and told him to get lost. Thinking about it, he felt he was not a good person. Considering Luan-ji's temper, he guessed the other man was probably still angry. At this moment, a palace attendant came to report that the fourth prince had invited him to go hunting in the suburbs. He thought of taking the opportunity to take Luan-ji out to relax, hoping it might cool his anger. So he accepted the hunting invitation. Muku went to the side room to ask Luan-ji to go hunting with him, only to find the other man still sound asleep. He was instantly furious. He hadn't slept all night, while the other man had slept soundly without a care in the world. He immediately lost his earlier gentleness and irritably told the other to get up, but then noticed how pale the other's face was. He subconsciously became concerned again, asking if he had caught a cold last night. The other man slapped his hand away and sarcastically called him an irrelevant person. Suppressing his anger, he invited the other to go hunting in the suburbs with him. Unsurprisingly, he was refused, but he had no intention of taking the refusal seriously. He only gave him a short time to get ready. Luan-ji didn't know what crazy idea Muku had this time. He just felt a terrible headache. He must have really caught a cold. The two of them went to the suburbs together for the appointment. Muku was thoughtfully helping Luan-ji out of the carriage when the fourth prince rode over on his horse, asking Muku why he hadn't changed his clothes. Muku explained that he was just there to watch and didn't plan to participate. The fourth prince said it was a pity and told him that the second prince had brought some new prey. He then sensed that something was wrong. After all, what kind of prey could there be in this freezing weather? Soon, soldiers drove out some raggedly dressed slaves. Learning that these slaves were the prey for this hunt, Luan Ji was horrified. He never imagined that the so-called hunt was actually about killing people. The next second, he learned that these slaves were citizens of Yun, which made him even more heartbroken. He glared fiercely at Mu Ku, not expecting that just because of a small dice, the other man would slaughter his people. Mu Ku reached out, wanting to explain to Luan Ji, but couldn't bring himself to speak. Luan Ji broke free from several soldiers and cursed them as bastards. He charged fiercely at Mu Ku and bit his shoulder hard to vent his anger. Mu Ku felt a sharp pain, but said nothing, just letting him bite. Seeing this, two soldiers wanted to step forward to stop Luan Ji's bold behavior, but they were stopped by Mu Ku. He waved his hand for the soldiers to retreat. Then he grabbed Luan Ji's arm, not expecting the other man to fight him over a few slaves. Thinking of this, he became annoyed and asked if the other man wanted to kill him. The other man immediately broke free from his grip and shouted for him to get away. He pinned the other man against the carriage, warning him to behave or he would strip him naked and throw him out in public. Luan Ji finally stopped struggling, just crying and asking him why he was doing this. He told the other man that he had originally just wanted to take him out to relax. Before he could explain clearly, the fourth prince shot and killed a slave right in front of them. He even complained that it was just a lowly slave, and that Luan Ji, as a young servant, was too ill-mannered to dare to lay a hand on his master. Luan Ji watched the Yun slave being shot, trembling all over. He suddenly knelt down, holding his head, and begged Mu Ku to kill him. Whatever anger he had, he should direct it at him, not harm the Yun slaves. He didn't know why Mu Ku hated him so much, and at this point, he didn't want to know. Since he could forget, it meant he didn't care about what happened between them at all. He blamed all of this on Mu Ku's interference. He gave Mu Ku two choices: either kill him or let him go, but don't trouble him anymore. Hearing these words, Mu Ku felt extremely disappointed. He never thought that for Luan Ji, all of this was just trouble and interference. He never thought Luan Ji really didn't care at all. It was all just his own one-sided affection. He had a young servant prepare a bow and arrow. If Luan Ji wanted to save those slaves, he would have to demonstrate his archery skills. As long as Luan Ji could shoot one person, he would order the others to be released. After speaking, he threw the bow and arrow towards Luan Ji. Luan Ji looked at the bow and arrow on the ground and asked Mu Ku if he really had to force him like this. Mu Ku only gave him two choices: either kill one person or watch his people die miserably. Mu Ku was using the lives of the common people to force him to shoot. He had no choice. He picked up the bow and arrow with trembling hands. Rather than being at the mercy of others, gaining a temporary reprieve at the cost of his people's lives, it was better to take a chance with the bow and arrow. His enemy was right in front of him, and the weapon was in his hands. At this distance, his archery skills would not fail him. He immediately aimed the bow and arrow at Mu Ku. The surrounding young servants were more nervous than Mu Ku. Seeing Luan Ji's fierce expression, Mu Ku frowned. He couldn't be sure if Luan Ji would actually shoot him. Mu Ku noticed that Luan Ji had aimed the arrow at him and ordered that no one was to come near him. The other man was stunned by this series of actions and hesitated to shoot. He, however, was calm, looking as if he was watching a good show. He wanted to see just how much Luan Ji hated him. Luan Ji kept telling himself that this was a rare opportunity. If he killed Mu Ku, he could avenge the destruction of his country, but he still couldn't bring himself to do it. He thought about all that had happened between them. The other man had even allowed the tribute from Yun to be halved. The other man seemed so ruthless, yet he had shown him care and concern at every turn. The hand holding the bow trembled uncontrollably. He didn't understand why the other man was so good to him. But the city of Yun had fallen, and he had not died for his country, which was disloyal. Now, with his enemy before him, his indecisiveness was even more dishonorable. Thinking of this, he lowered the bow and arrow. A person like him had no face to return to his country, nor could he face his old acquaintances. He felt he was just Muku's plaything and believed the other man had long predicted he wouldn't be able to do it. Everything was as Muka had expected. In the end, Luan-ji couldn't bring himself to harm him. He extended his hand towards Luan-ji, softly calling for him to come over. Their relationship had just eased for a moment when the fourth prince was about to shoot another slave, claiming it was to vent Muku's anger. Seeing this, Luan-ji immediately became agitated again, shouting, "Don't." Then he rushed out, intending to block the arrow for the slave. The fourth prince did not give up on shooting the slave just because of his interference. Instead, at that moment, he released the arrow. It shot straight towards him. Just as he was about to die, Muku, seeing the situation, his eyebrows knitted together, shouted Luan-ji's pet name. Then he pushed off forcefully, trying to save Luan-ji. The next second, the arrow hit its target, drawing a lot of blood. Luan-ji's heart tightened. Clearly, the target was not him. At the critical moment, it was Muka who appeared and blocked the arrow for both him and the slave. The fourth prince, having shot the wrong person, immediately became nervous. Muka had no time to worry about the fourth prince. He angrily asked Luan-ji if he was crazy. The other man was startled by his shout, and tears welled up in his eyes again. He pulled the other man into his arms, constantly murmuring that nothing could happen to him. Luan-ji saw the blood on Muku's hand and suddenly felt a pang of guilt. He didn't know why Muku had done it and asked why he had saved him. Before he got an answer, he fainted in the other's arms. Luan-ji's fainting spell terrified Muku. Muku shouted his name, trying to wake him up. Noticing Luan-ji's flushed face and labored breathing, Muku touched his forehead. He didn't know until he touched it, but he was shocked. The other's forehead was unexpectedly hot. He picked the other man up, intending to take him away from this place of trouble. An oblivious young servant, however, blocked his path at this moment. He irritably told the young servant to get out of the way. When he came to his senses, he realized that Luan-ji in his arms had started to shiver. He immediately became anxious. He shouted for someone to quickly summon the imperial physician. Muka stayed by Luan-ji's bedside without leaving. A palace attendant reminded him that he should rest. He waved his hand, rejecting the attendant's suggestion, insisting on personally watching Luan-ji wake up. When Luan-ji woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. He was startled by Muku at his bedside. Seeing the other's sleeping face, he realized that Muku had, without his knowledge, already had a significant impact on him. The other man was the enemy who had caused the ruin of his country and family. Yet he didn't even have the courage to raise a sword for revenge. He couldn't help but start questioning what was wrong with him. Had he completely forgotten the humiliation of kneeling in surrender and being forced into servitude? Thinking of this, he realized he hadn't forgotten any of it. He sat up in bed in horror. The sudden movement woke Muku up. The other man then realized he was awake. Muku got up, wanting to touch his forehead to see if his fever had subsided, but he ignored it. Seeing that he was awake, a palace attendant wanted him to persuade Muku to rest. After all, Muku hadn't slept for 2 days while taking care of him. He asked Muku irritably, since he wanted to torture him, why did he save him? In any case, his worthless life should have been lost on the day his country fell. Muku told Luan-ji that even if he didn't cherish this life, someone else did. Whether the other man believed it or not, he had already submitted memorials several times to prohibit the hunting of humans for sport. But he was afraid that in Luan-ji's heart, he was already an inhumane and ruthless person. Luan-ji bit his lip hard. He believed Muku. From now on, he would also do his best to assist Muku and would not deliberately anger him again. He only asked the other man to release those slaves and not to kill them. Muku reached out to touch Luan-ji but stopped because he knew the other man didn't fully trust him. He told Luan-ji that he had already sent people to settle those slaves and that he should rest assured. He felt that even if Luan-ji was unwilling to assist him and caused him trouble every day, it was still better than being sick in bed. Right now, he didn't know what to do with Luan-ji. Luan-ji watched Muku's departing figure. The other man had both pushed him into the abyss and saved him repeatedly. He didn't know how to face Muku from now on. He didn't understand the other man, and he understood himself even less. At this time, Luan-ji had already recovered and was sitting by the window drinking tea. A noise came from outside, but Muku had not yet returned from court. He couldn't help but wonder who would dare to cause trouble in the Eastern Palace. The palace attendants knelt at the entrance, stating that the crown prince was not in the palace and hoping the fourth prince would not make things difficult for them. The fourth prince pointed at Luan-Ji and explained that he wasn't there to see the crown prince, but had come specifically to settle scores with Luan-Ji. Hearing that the fourth prince had come to settle scores with him, Luan-Ji's heart tightened, feeling that something bad was about to happen. Luan-Ji just yawned nonchalantly, which infuriated the fourth prince. He placed a finger on his lips and asked with an innocent expression who the other person was. The fourth prince pointed at Luan-Ji in a rage, accusing him of disrespecting him at the hunting ground. Luan-Ji immediately retorted sarcastically that he didn't know what crime he had committed to make him so relentless in his brother's palace. Hearing Luan-Ji's words, his face darkened by at least 10 shades. Seeing that he couldn't win a war of words, he drew the whip he carried with him. He brandished the whip, accusing the other of sowing discord and ordering him to kneel immediately. Unexpectedly, not only did the other man not kneel, but he also sat down. He cursed the other as a lowly slave from Yun. As a prince, if he ordered him to kneel, he must kneel. Luan-Ji still didn't kneel and casually picked a foxtail weed to play with. No wonder Mu-Ku didn't allow him to go out casually. It was probably because he was afraid he would run into trouble like the fourth prince. Seeing that Luan-Ji had no intention of kneeling, the fourth prince threatened him with the slaves from the hunting ground. Luan-Ji was not flustered at all. Mu-Ku had personally promised him that he would release those Yun slaves. The fourth prince told Luan-Ji to stop using Mu-Ku as a shield, calling him a lowly slave over and over. Then, he ordered his men to drag the Yun slaves out and execute them. He didn't believe Mu-Ku would hold it against him for a few slaves. Seeing that the fourth prince was not going to let the slaves go, Luan-Ji was no longer so calm. He mocked the other for being a prince, but only daring to take his anger out on defenseless commoners. The other was successfully provoked and immediately raised his whip at him. He reached out and grabbed the whip, asking what kind of hero takes his anger out on others. If he had the guts, he should come at him. He also realized that he couldn't continue to entangle with the other man, as it would implicate Mu-Ku if the matter reached the emperor. Unexpectedly, Mu-Ku suddenly returned and shouted at Luan-Ji, "Are you asking for a beating?" Luan-Ji immediately hid behind a pillar, laughing and greeting him. He asked the other if his skin was itching for a beating and what he had promised him a few days ago. The other explained that he was just anxious to save people and didn't really want to die. He decided to let the other suffer a bit to improve his memory. Then he ordered the other to be given 20 strokes of the cane as a warning to others. The fourth prince strongly agreed with Mu-Ku's action, believing that an ill-mannered servant should be taught a good lesson. Luan-Ji was placed on the punishment platform. He hadn't expected Mu-Ku to be serious. A palace attendant watched Luan-Ji being punished, thinking to himself that his frail body probably couldn't take it. The next second, Mu-Ku turned around and suddenly waved his hand to stop. After hearing Mu-Ku's command, the attendant stopped the punishment. Mu-Ku asked the attendant if the imperial physician had given any special instructions before. The attendant immediately replied that the physician had instructed that Luan-Ji needed to rest well. A few strokes of the cane would probably take half his life. It would be better to punish him by confining him to his room to reflect and copy the Heart Sutra a few times. Mu-Ku coughed a few times and asked if they had all heard clearly. The attendants all understood. Then Mu-Ku ordered that no one was allowed to enter the Eastern Palace without his permission. Otherwise, they would be dealt with according to palace rules. The fourth prince knew this order was aimed at him. Since Luan-Ji's arrival, he had fallen out of favor. Luan-Ji was in the study, being punished by copying the Heart Sutra, while Mu-Ku read a book nearby. Luan-Ji was furious but dare not speak. But he really couldn't copy anymore. He looked at Mu-Ku with puffed cheeks. While he was being punished by copying, the other man had the leisure to read. Then, he brought the copied Heart Sutra to the other man, saying he was finished. After checking it, the other man pointed out many mistakes and ordered him to recopy it. He protested angrily, snapping the brush in two. He also complained that Mu-Ku was just nitpicking and deliberately making things difficult for him. The other man asked him if he didn't want to copy books and didn't want to be beaten. How could there be such a perfect solution? Seeing that he really didn't want to copy, Mu-Ku leaned closer and proposed a different punishment. In any case, he had to be taught a lesson. After speaking, he took the opportunity to kiss him. He was caught off guard by the kiss, his eyes wide with shock. Mu-Ku remembered that when Luan-Ji was unconscious, The imperial physician had diagnosed him with a chronic low-grade fever and memory loss, suspecting that he might not be sick but poisoned. Muka thus learned that the other might have forgotten him due to illness. Luan-Ji bit his lip and took the opportunity to push him away. The other man, blushing and covering his mouth, asked what he was doing. Muka wiped his bitten lip. Since the other was afraid of both pain and fatigue, this was the only way to punish him. The imperial physician had mentioned that to help him regain his memory, they could recreate profound past events to stimulate and guide him. While he was thinking, Luan-Ji had already backed away to the desk, constantly wiping his mouth. He walked up behind Luan-Ji and comforted him not to be afraid. Luan-Ji struggled, telling Mu-Ku to let him go. He knew Mu-Ku was young and vigorous, so he suggested that the other man take a few more concubines. Unexpectedly, the next second, the other man pushed him down onto the desk, saying he didn't want concubines, he only wanted him. Luan-Ji was pushed down onto the desk by Mu-Ku. He immediately shouted, "Assassin!" Hearing there was an assassin, the guards all rushed into the study with their swords drawn, only to see this lovey-dovey scene. For a moment, they didn't know where to look. Muka's good moment was ruined. He glared irritably at the intrusive guards. At this moment, his face was probably darker than Judge Bao's. He demanded to know on whose order the guards had entered. Luan-Ji straightened his messy clothes, explaining that the assassin had run in the other direction and told the guards to go with him. He also planned to use this excuse to sneak away. Before he could escape for 2.5 seconds, he was lifted up by Mu-Ku like a little chick. While holding him, Mu-Ku shooed all the guards out. He struggled, telling the other to let him go. He chose to continue copying the book. Hearing his choice, Mu-Ku just gave a cold laugh. Then Mu-Ku let him go. He obediently said he was going to copy the book, but was suddenly stopped by the other man. The other man warned him not to use any more little tricks to get himself into trouble. Otherwise, everyone involved in the matter would not escape. He realized the other man was not joking with him, but was serious. He then began to explain to the other man that the incident with the fourth prince was a complete accident, and he had no intention of seeking death. He told the other man not to worry. He had promised to do his best to assist him and would never easily go back on his word. At this moment, Luan-Ji was wandering around the Eastern Palace's study, holding a pile of books. He couldn't help but complain about Mu-Ku. Why did he have so many books in his study? It was too much trouble to find anything, and they were placed so high. Wasn't this deliberately bullying him for being short? As he reached for a book, he accidentally knocked a small box off the shelf. The box landed squarely on his head, giving him a big bump. He suddenly noticed something inside the box, and immediately had a guess. He opened the box. Sure enough, inside the box was a lock of black hair. He had originally thought that giving a lock of hair as a love token was a custom of Yin. He hadn't expected the rival state to have it too. He was even more surprised that Mu-Ku would carefully keep something given by a young lady. He gently stroked the lock of hair in the box, but then he suddenly froze. He remembered giving a lock of his hair to Mu-Ku and telling him that accepting the hair meant accepting his confession. At this moment, he felt a splitting headache. Mu-Ku suddenly burst in, demanding to know what he was doing. Luan-Ji rubbed his throbbing head and apologized to Mu-Ku. He noticed that his headaches had become more frequent recently, and he had seen a scene of others pledging their love with a lock of hair. But he had clearly never seen such a scene before. He began to explain to Mu-Ku that he was just tidying up the study. Mu-Ku didn't say much more, just picked up the box containing the lock of hair. He held the box to his chest, gently stroking the lock of hair inside. Luan-Ji hadn't expected Mu-Ku to be so deeply affectionate, to cherish a lock of his beloved's hair so much. Seeing the other's cold expression, he knew he had said the wrong thing and covered his mouth. Mu-Ku placed the box with the lock of hair on the highest shelf. He was somewhat disappointed because the person he cherished was Luan-Ji, but the other no longer remembered him. Luan-Ji was also somewhat disappointed because Mu-Ku hadn't refuted him, which meant he really did have someone he cherished. Thinking of this, his heart began to ache with a mix of emotions. Mu-Ku saw Luan-Ji in a daze and reminded him that it was time for bed. Luan-Ji ignored Mu-Ku, thinking that since the other man already had a sweetheart, how could he still be so frivolous with him? He angrily told the other man to rest well, as he would not sleep here. The other man questioned why he was being difficult, saying he had only been settled for a few days before reverting to his old ways. He immediately avoided physical contact with the other man, explaining that he wasn't being difficult. It was just that the crown prince's bed was too comfortable, and he wanted to emulate King Gojin of Yu by enduring hardship to stage a comeback. Unexpectedly, Mu-Ku became even angrier after hearing this, thinking he was deliberately making trouble at night instead of sleeping. But no matter what, he was unwilling to share a bed with the other man again, insisting on sleeping on a straw mat out of spite. The other man grabbed him. He confirmed with him again if he really wanted to sleep on a straw mat. Unexpectedly, half an hour later, a maid really did lay out a straw mat for him. He lay down on the straw mat without any hesitation and even gave a contented yawn. The next second, Muku also lay down beside him. In less than 2.5 seconds, he had him pinned underneath, even reminding him to be careful not to fall off and catch a cold. He stammered that this was a straw mat and told the other man to go sleep on the bed. Muku gently leaned close to Luo and Ji's ear and said that everything in the Eastern Palace was his, including him. After speaking, he even gently caressed the other's body. He had long felt the bed was too big. This was just right. He could even sleep foot to foot with the other man. Seeing that Luo and Ji was about to become Muku's meal, he had to resort to his old trick and shout that there was an assassin. Before he could shout, Muku had pulled out his belt, warning him that if he dared to scream, he would strip his clothes off. Tears of fear were about to stream down his face, his mind racing, wondering what he should do. Luo and Ji was truly panicked. He told Muku that he had not yet taken a concubine and begged the other man to spare him. The other man lifted his chin, told him not to bite his lip, and then ripped off his clothes, saying he would give him a taste of something sweet. When he woke up the next day, Luo and Ji was already lying on the bed in the Easter Palace. He recalled how Muka had personally carried him to bed yesterday and said he would teach him something better next time. Thinking of this, he immediately sat up from the bed, angrily clutching the quilt. Muka had also specially instructed the maids, saying he was unwell, so the maids told him to ask for anything he needed. Hearing this made him even angrier, and he cursed Muku as a bastard in his heart. He realized he couldn't just sit back and wait for his doom. He had to think of a plan quickly. He sat melancholically in the pavilion thinking of a plan, but was spotted by Muku. The other man asked what he was doing and if he didn't feel cold. He pulled his cloak tighter, explaining that he felt stuffy in the room and came out for a walk. The other man lifted his hair, thinking he should indeed see more sun, and even teased him about yesterday's events. Hearing this, his heart immediately tightened. If this continued, he would be bent. He then looked at the other man with a beaming smile, saying he had a favor to ask of him. He wanted Muku to help him choose a few concubines. As soon as the other man heard this, his face immediately darkened by more than 8 shades, suspecting he was being spiteful. He immediately told the other man that he liked women, that love between a man and a woman is a matter of course, and hoped the other man would grant his wish. Unexpectedly, the other man surprisingly agreed after hearing this and immediately summoned people for him. Soon, 5 palace maids in macaron-colored dresses appeared. They bowed neatly to Muku. Muku told Luo and Ji that these were the most beautiful palace maids in the palace. He told the other man to choose 1 or 2 from them to be his concubines, and that he could arrange for them to consummate their union tonight. Luo and Ji didn't expect Muku to actually help him choose beauties, and so readily hand him over to someone else. He pretended that nothing was wrong, hiding his true emotions, and thanked Muku with a cupped fist bow. The maids covered their faces with fans, gently bowing to him. He told the maids not to be so formal, and then ordered them to raise their heads. Not looking was one thing, but one look was a shock. What beauties were these? They were clearly girls with freckled, monkey-butt faces. Luo and Ji was also sweating profusely. He picked up his teacup, intending to calm down, and then ordered them to withdraw. Muku, propping up his chin at the side, watched him with great interest and asked if he had chosen. He awkwardly turned his head away, making the excuse that he didn't want to choose anymore. Muku immediately grabbed Luo and Ji's shoulder. In that case, he would assume the person he wanted was him. Luo and Ji shouted, on what grounds? He clearly hadn't chosen Muku. But Muku didn't care about that. He had given Luo and Ji the right to choose, and the other man had given it up himself. Since that was the case, he would have to choose for him. He directly swept Luo and Ji up horizontally. The other man complained that what he was doing was against the rules and that he was going too far. He couldn't help but find it somewhat laughable. In this vast Eastern palace, someone was actually talking to him about rules. He told the other man that his words were the rules. If the ruler wanted the subject to die, the subject must die. The other man could be considered half his subject. He carried Luo and Ji back to the room. The other man struggled ineffectively in his arms the whole way, even questioning how he could do such intimate things with someone else when he already had a sweetheart. Hearing the other man say this, He was stunned for a moment, then let go of his hands. The other man fell right on his bottom. Seeing Luo Ng's pathetic state, he couldn't help but laugh at him for bringing it on himself. As for who his sweetheart was, he planned to let Luo Ng remember on his own. With that, he cupped the other man's face. Soon, Luo Ng's voice came from the room. He was calling Mu Ku's name, telling him it hurt. At this moment, Luo Ng was sitting by the window, teasing a bird, looking very leisurely. A maid came forward and draped a piece of clothing over him, reminding him that since he had received the crown prince's favor, he should pay more attention to his health. Hearing this, he couldn't help but give a cold laugh, his hand gripping the clothes even tighter. He looked at the bird in the cage, thinking that Muka must have long regarded him as a caged bird. The maid saw his unhappiness and asked why he was not happy when the crown prince treated him so well. He raised his hand and opened the bird cage, releasing the caged bird. As the monarch of Yunla, his every word and action represented Yunla. He absolutely could not bring shame to the country. Even if he was in an enemy country, he could not submit to his enemy. The maid could not understand his suffering, only knowing that the crown prince treated him so well it was enviable. Muka suddenly returned, asking with concern why Luo Ng wasn't resting more. Seeing Muku, Luo Ng immediately turned his head to avoid him. In 7 days, it would be his birthday. Muku asked if there was any gift he wanted. He immediately turned back and asked if he could have anything he wanted. Muka told Luo Ng to first say what gift he wanted, and then he would consider whether to agree. If he agreed directly, the other man would probably immediately ask him for a cup of poison wine. The other man hesitated for a moment, then proposed that he wanted to go back to Yunla for a look. Hearing this request, he immediately frowned, but he still patiently asked the other man why he wanted to go back to Yunla. Was it because he was worried about his younger brother, Luo Yinyu? But Luo Yinyu had already been enfeoffed as the vassal king of Yunla. Muko also learned from the memorials sent from Yunla that Luo Yinyu had a capable eunuch by his side. Luo Ng knew the eunuch Muko was talking about was Song Guang. Song Guang was not only strategic, but also very loyal to Luo Yinyu. Song Guang had once promised him that he would do his best to assist Luo Yinyu and protect the people of Yunla. With Song Guang by Luo Yinyu's side, he could indeed be more at ease. In that case, Muka thought he didn't need to worry. The state had also sent officials to support Yunla. After speaking, he laughed at him for being a worrier. No wonder his courtesy name was Xiaozhong. He even flicked his forehead, telling him to be good. The people of Yunla would only get better and better. He rubbed his stinging forehead, saying he had always been very obedient. Muka took the opportunity to have him stay in the Eastern Palace for his birthday. After all, the journey was long, and he couldn't stand carriages. He proposed that he wanted to watch Yunla's flower drum opera. Muka then promised he would find a Yunla opera troupe. Seeing Muka being so thoughtful, he stopped fussing about returning to Yunla and even thanked the other man. He looked at Muku, thinking that it had been a long time since anyone had celebrated his birthday with him. Early in the morning, a maid told him that Muku had already finished the morning court session and invited him to have a meal. He rubbed his eyes, wondering what trick Muku was up to so early in the morning. At this time, Muku was still struggling with a bowl of longevity noodles. Following the imperial chef's steps, he had made a bowl of longevity noodles that looked disgusting. Luo Ng, with a bewildered face, asked him what had happened. He did not answer the other's question, merely using a cough to cover his embarrassment. The other man leaned in to look. He turned his back haughtily, unable to even look at the longevity noodles himself. Seeing food with such an appearance, Luo Ng immediately broke into a cold sweat. He asked him what this was. He haughtily spat out the 3 words longevity noodles. The other man, however, unexpectedly showed a smile. He picked up the longevity noodles, intending to order someone to take the noodles away. Luo Ng noticed the bandages and wounds on his hand and knew that he had made these longevity noodles himself. Luo Ng shouted for Muku to wait and snatched the bowl of longevity noodles back from the other's hands. He held the longevity noodles, preparing to taste them, and even smiled as he told the other man that he was the birthday star today. He picked up a chopstick full of noodles, comforting himself that occasionally experiencing such a unique noodle dish was not bad. On his birthdays in the past, he would beg Lu Ji to have the imperial chef make him a bowl of longevity noodles. But Lu Ji would refuse him due to matters of state, and even told him not to cause trouble and worry his majesty. Thinking of this, he became dejected again. Muka suddenly called out to him and reached out to touch his face. They looked at each other for a while, and the atmosphere suddenly became a bit subtle. Luo and Ji immediately turned his head away and coughed lightly. He complained that the longevity noodles Muke made had a pungent taste. Muke then said that he had sent people to set up a stage, and he would take him there now to help with digestion. He didn't expect that in just 2 days, the other man would have such a magnificent stage built. Looking at the other's back, Luo and Ji guessed that he must have put in a lot of effort. The other man noticed him in a daze and called out to him, "Get up there quickly." The fourth prince saw Muku and complained that his imperial brother was too late. He was about to starve to death. Seeing Luo and Ji, he immediately became unsettled and even asked why his imperial brother had brought Luo and Ji along. Luo and Ji smiled back at him. This Eastern Palace garden isn't his, so why can't the crown prince's Xiaoqing be here? Hearing him say this, he was momentarily at a loss for a rebuttal. Seeing the two bickering like primary school kids, Muku sighed helplessly. He comforted Luo and Ji, telling him not to dwell on past matters, lest it ruin his mood on his birthday. Luo and Ji found a seat opposite the fourth prince and sat down in a huff. He then made a face at the other, who immediately tattled to Muku. Muku told them both to stop and sit down properly to watch the play. Luo and Ji looked towards the stage. The person on the stage quickly caught his attention. He recognized the person on the stage at a glance. It was clearly Mei Luji. He immediately stood up and looked at the stage in disbelief, not understanding why Mei Luji would be here. Muku immediately noticed that something was wrong with Luo and Ji and asked what was the matter. He stepped forward and touched the other's forehead, asking if he was feeling unwell. He had said before that the poison in Luo and Ji's body was not yet cured. If this continued for a long time, it could be life-threatening. He thought that they couldn't delay any longer. They had to find a way to detoxify him as soon as possible. Seeing Mei Luji, Luo and Ji was suddenly thrown into disarray. He slumped back into his chair, wondering how the other person got in. Was he alone, or did he bring the entire opera troupe? He realized his panic and actively told himself to remain calm. He couldn't let Muku notice this, otherwise Mei Luji would definitely be in danger. He cracked melon seeds while telling himself to calm down quickly. Muku suddenly handed him a candied fruit, reminding him that eating too many melon seeds can make his mouth dry, so he should eat a candied fruit. Muku told him to open his mouth obediently, and he did so. Mei Luji saw this scene from the stage, so angry he could almost grind his back teeth to dust. Luo and Ji glanced at the stage and found that Mei Luji was looking at them. He immediately became flustered again and accidentally knocked the candied fruit from Muku's hand. In his panic, Luo and Ji realized his gaffe and immediately apologized to Muku. But Muku thought it was because he was personally feeding the other person that he had scared him. To alleviate his fear, Muku deliberately teased him, asking if he was thinking about something improper. Luo and Ji immediately retorted that he was a proper man and of course would not think about improper things. Hearing this, the man wrapped an arm around his slender waist, his expression amorous, and asked the person in his arms if he was thinking about him. Luo and Ji turned his head away, immediately giving a negative answer. And this scene of their flirtatious bickering was seen clearly by Mei Luji downstairs. He was suddenly furious, feeling that Muku was truly despicable to dare to flirt with his majesty like this. After a while, because Muku had to go back to the study first to handle some urgent memorials, he let Luo and Ji wander around the garden by himself. Luo and Ji immediately agreed and told the other man not to let him delay official business. The strong man affectionately scraped his nose and instructed him to only stay within this garden and not to run around. After the other man left, Luo and Ji thought to himself that he must, before Muku found out, hurry up and find out why his teacher, Mei Luji, suddenly appeared here and get him to leave as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, just as he stepped out of the garden, he was spotted by the fourth prince. Watching the man's panic departing back, the fourth prince thought he must be up to no good. The next second, Luo and Ji arrived outside the opera troupe's courtyard. Just as he was considering whether his actions would expose him, he was suddenly gagged and forcibly dragged away by someone. Luo and Ji struggled desperately until, after a good while, the person let him go. He was about to shout for help when a closer look revealed the person was Mei Luji. So, he immediately asked his teacher why he was here. The man lowered his head slightly, and after considering for a long while, he told him in a low voice that he came this time to take him back to Yunla. But Luo and Ji had no intention of returning to his own country, because he had already promised Mu Ku to stay here. He felt he could not go back on his word, so he had no plans to leave at all. He told Mei Luji that he was doing well and hoped he would leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, Muka would not let it rest if he found out. But Mei Luji told him not to worry, because the emperor would not vent his anger on Yunla over a private matter, and told him to leave with him without worry. Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly saw the hickey on the man's neck. He was instantly enraged and then loudly and frantically questioned the man about who did this. Seeing the other's grave expression, Luo and Ji was a bit confused. He touched his neck and only then remembered. It was this morning. When Mu Ku was whispering in his ear, he left such a shameful mark. Mei Luji also seemed to have discovered something and confirmed with him if this was Mu Ku's doing. For a moment, Luo and Ji was suddenly at a loss for words. He didn't know how to explain to his teacher. Looking at the silent man, Mei Luji was full of regret. He was just about to reach out and touch the other, but in the next second, he silently retracted his hand. He blamed himself deeply, blaming himself for not coming to rescue him sooner. But Luo and Ji shook his head, saying it was not his fault. He felt that staying here was not a bad thing. After all, Muka had also helped Yunla a lot. Hearing the others still speaking well of Mu Ku, Mei Luji became even more furious. He declared loudly that no matter what, he would take the other back to his own country. He told Luo and Ji to wait for him at the same spot in 3 days at the hour of Mao to escape together. But Luo and Ji was still hesitant. He worried that if he left now, Mu Ku would come after him. Before he could think it through, Mei Luji pulled him to his side, telling him that the emperor of a country absolutely cannot stay here to be insulted and trampled by the country's enemy. And he needed him too. As he spoke, Mei Luji sighed slightly, his mind randomly recalling scenes of teaching the other before. That was the young Luo and Ji, who was often caned by his majesty for poor schoolwork. And as the crown prince's teacher, he was often by his side. The Luo and Ji of that time was so happy, joyful, and carefree. Recalling the past and comparing it with the present, Mei Luji's heart ached. He secretly vowed that he would never let Mu Ku harm Luo and Ji again. Just then, a rustling sound suddenly came from the bushes. Mei Luji immediately shouted at the bushes, asking who was there. The fourth prince no longer hid and stepped out directly, claiming that Luo and Ji was cheating on Mu Ku with an outsider. Seeing his appearance, Luo and Ji was also very surprised. He didn't expect the fourth prince to be here. Looking at the advancing fourth prince, to prevent him from revealing the plan, Mei Luji quickly pulled a dagger from his sleeve, deciding to end it now. When Luo and Ji saw this, he quickly told the man not to be impulsive and said he would figure something out. He thought that if his teacher killed the fourth prince now, then everything would be irreversible. He must first ensure his teacher's safe retreat. But if he doesn't leave, his teacher won't leave easily either. The only thing to do now is to first agree with Mei Luji and then stabilize the fourth prince. To prevent the other from revealing this matter, Luo and Ji came up with a plan. He called out to the fourth prince, saying that his leaving was what the other wished for anyway. The fourth prince did not understand what this meant. Then Luo and Ji continued, asking the other to turn a blind eye to today's events, and then he would never be in his way again. He also threatened him, saying that if a narrow-minded person like him stayed in the Eastern Palace, he would definitely sow discord between the two brothers in the future. The fourth prince was furious after hearing this, momentarily speechless with anger. Then he cursed Luo and Ji, saying if his imperial brother knew he was such a petty person, he would never like him again. But Luo and Ji calmly stated that Mu Ku would not know about this, and relentlessly asked the fourth prince if he had made up his mind, whether to let him go or not. After a moment of thought, the fourth prince told him to get lost, far away. If he still saw him in the Eastern Palace after 3 days, don't blame him for being impolite. Then he turned and left. But Mei Luji was still worried, wondering if it was really okay to let him go like this. But right now, Luo and Ji had no other choice but to delay for as long as he could. He told Mei Luji to prepare quickly, and they would leave the palace in 3 days. Then he would find a chance to come back. That way, even if the fourth prince reported him, he could explain it to Mu Ku. Seeing the man agree to leave with him, Mei Luji told him to rest assured that he would arrange everything properly. At this time, Mu Ku was in the study, giving tasks to his subordinate, Wolf Fong. It turned out he had noticed a change in Luo and Ji's expression today, so he ordered Wolf Fong to investigate those two opera troupes. Just then, Luo and Ji also came to the study to find him and happened to see Wolf Fong walking out. Looking at the others departing back, he was very puzzled as to why he would come at this time. As the man was thinking, Muku discovered him and told him to come in quickly. Otherwise, he would personally carry him in. Realizing he had been discovered by Muku, Luo and Ji quickly came to his senses and immediately walked into the room. He asked if something had happened in the palace, but Muku did not answer. He pulled the man into his arms and lifted the other's chin. He felt that Luo and Ji was now more and more like the master of the Eastern Palace. It was time to give him the official seal of the Crown Princess. But Luo and Ji tactfully retorted, saying that as the Shaoqing of the Eastern Palace, it was his duty to care about matters in the palace. This remark immediately let Muka see through him, because every time he lacked confidence, he would stutter when he spoke. This meant he had hesitated just now. Then he hugged the man tighter again, believing that the other had begun to tacitly allow him to enter his heart. Feeling Muku's warm breath on his ear, Luo and Ji was a bit dazed. He didn't expect that the other man could really guess his thoughts every time. And now that Muku was holding him in his arms, he didn't push him away like before. Seeing the person in his arms not resisting, Muku was very surprised. He gently stroked the back of the man's head, because this was the first time the man had responded to him. But the other's unusual behavior also made him wonder what he was hiding from him. Just then, Luo and Ji, held in Muku's arms, actually started to cry. Muku cupped his face with a pained heart and asked him why he was unhappy. Luo and Ji quickly prevaricated. The crown prince of a great nation was celebrating his birthday for him. How could he be unhappy? Hearing this, Muku, as if by magic, pulled a box from his sleeve and handed it to the other, and told him this was his birthday gift. Luo and Ji was very surprised. He slowly opened the box. What came into view was an exquisitely beautiful pendant. Looking at this pendant, for some reason, a vague memory suddenly surfaced in his mind. It seemed this pendant was given to him by a certain young man when he was young. That young man had also promised to come find him after a year. Thinking of this, Luo and Ji's head split with pain, and countless memory fragments flashed through his mind. Seeing the man seemed unwell, Muku immediately came over to support him, asking if he was not feeling well. Luo and Ji shook his head, saying he was fine. He also told the other man that he liked this birthday gift very much. Hearing this, Muku continued to instruct him to wear this pendant often in the future. This pendant has been blessed in a temple and can ensure safety. After speaking, he helped the man hang the pendant on his waist. Seeing this, Luo and Ji felt very guilty. The other man not only prepared a gift for him, but also went to a temple to pray for him. And yet he was hiding the fact that he was helping Mei Luji escape, which really made him feel bad. After hanging the pendant, Muku looked at the man with deep affection and spoke words of love to him, and stepped forward to hold his hands, fingers intertwined. The moment their skin touched, Luo and Ji suddenly retreated in a panic, like a startled rabbit. The strong Muku gently comforted the other. He would not force him to accept him now, but at least he should not be afraid and avoid him anymore. Luo and Ji calmed himself down and asked Muku to give him a little time. Hearing this, Muku said indulgently that he had already waited this long. A few more days did not matter. He just hoped that what the other said was not an excuse to delay. Luo and Ji repeatedly agreed, but what he was thinking was that after Mei Luji left safely, he would definitely give Muku an answer. The scene changes. Waking up the next day, Luo and Ji did not see Muku anywhere. This made him feel vaguely uneasy. At this time, a servant came to report that Muku would be staying in the imperial study today, and that Luo and Ji did not need to wait for him. Luo and Ji thought for a moment and asked all the servants to leave. He wanted to be alone for a while. After the servants were gone, he let out a long breath. He thought to himself, today, before Muku returned, he must send Mei Luji out of the palace. Then he would send his teacher away and hurry back. Otherwise, Muku would definitely become suspicious. He looked at the servants outside the door and suddenly had an idea. The next second, he had changed into a eunuch's clothes. After peeking around, he jumped down from the window. Unexpectedly, he stepped on a branch, making a sound. Several eunuchs heard the noise and immediately shouted, "Who's there?" Luo and Ji quickly hid behind a wall, holding his breath and not moving. Seeing the sound seemed to have suddenly disappeared, the eunuchs thought they had misheard. One of them was about to go forward to check carefully, but was stopped by another eunuch. Luo and Ji breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, he was not discovered. He moved quickly. Next was to meet up with Mei Luji. He quietly arrived at the meeting spot they had agreed on yesterday. After looking around, he found no one there. He adjusted the bundle on his back, secretly hoping everything would go smoothly on his teacher's end. However, after waiting for half an hour, still no one came. Luo and Ji was very confused. Could something have happened to his teacher? Just as he was about to go look for Mei Luji, an old man suddenly called out to him from behind. Luo and Ji turned to look, but did not recognize who it was. However, that person claimed that things had changed. Because Mei Luji could not get away, he had sent him to pick up Luo and Ji. He also told him to hurry up and go with him. At this moment, a group of guards happened to pass by. Luo and Ji was afraid of being discovered, and without time to think too much, he immediately followed this old man, not noticing at all the sinister smile on the old man's face under the cloak. The old man led Luo and Ji in circles around the palace, as if deliberately. After a good while, Luo and Ji finally realized that this was not the way to the city gate at all. He immediately asked the old man what he did under Mei Luji. The other man answered with a grin that he was just a stableman. Hearing this, Luo and Ji became even more puzzled. Why would his teacher send a stableman to pick him up? And although this person's clothes were old and worn, they were clean and tidy, and he did not have the usual smell of a stableman. Thinking of this, he stopped in his tracks. A bad thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He was shocked. Could this person be one of the fourth prince's men? Was it to trick him into a deserted place and then kill him to silence him? But Luo and Ji immediately dismissed this thought, because the fourth prince did not have such cunning. After thinking, he again loudly asked the other who he was and where Mei Luji was. At this time, the old man had already led Luo and Ji to a courtyard and claimed that Mei Luji was already waiting for him inside. Luo and Ji followed closely behind him, walking into this unfamiliar courtyard, while thinking to himself that since it had come to this, he would see what tricks this person was playing. He followed the old man to the front of a room. The other man, smiling, lifted the door curtain for him. Luo and Ji walked in with a wary expression. When he saw clearly who was in the room, he was instantly astonished. He never expected that the person standing before him was not Mei Luji. He saw Muke standing with his hands behind his back, facing away from him. Although he could not see his expression, he could feel the gravity in the atmosphere. The man slowly turned his head and asked why the other was so flustered to see him. Caught red-handed, Luo and Ji did not know how to answer for a moment. The pressure from the man opposite him scared him into retreating repeatedly. Of the 36 stratagems, fleeing is the best. He turned and wanted to run. Seeing the other trying to escape right in front of him, Muku immediately ordered the guards to stop him. Before Luo and Ji could run out of the room, the guards had seized him. And these guards were not the type to be gentle. No matter how Luo and Ji struggled, they had no intention of letting go. One of them even kicked him in the knee, forcing him to kneel before Muku. Looking at the man before him, Muku was very disappointed in him. He had gone to great lengths to celebrate the other's birthday, only to have him collude with an outside enemy. He stepped forward and pinched Luo and Ji's chin tightly, asking if this was how he repaid him. Luo and Ji repeatedly denied it, but did not know how to explain. Muku then questioned him about his relationship with the person who wanted to help him escape. Hearing this, Luo and Ji finally realized that his teacher had also been captured. He looked anxious and immediately grabbed the man's hand, asking where Mei Luji was. Muku became even angrier upon hearing this. He flung his hand away and then ordered the guards to bring Mei Luji up. Looking at his bruised and battered teacher, Luo and Ji was so heartbroken he could not even speak. His mind once again recalled all the little moments he had spent with him before. It was also because of him that the other was shielded by his father emperor. Now, it was for his sake that he was captured and tortured by Muku. The more Luo and Ji thought about it, the more his heart ached. Just as he was about to step forward to save Mei Luji, he was held back by Muku, who restrained him from moving forward. Then Muku ordered the guards to wake Mei Luji up. Watching the guards get closer and closer to his teacher, Luo and Ji thought Muku was going to harm his teacher again. He anxiously explained to the man that he was not trying to escape, that today's events were just a stopgap measure. However, Muka no longer believed him, instead feeling that even at this point, the other was still spouting lies. He immediately ordered the guards to wake Mei Luji up with water. The guards obeyed the order. Luo and Ji looked at his teacher, who was covered in injuries, his eyes filled with sorrow, but he was helpless. He could only watch as the guards poured a basin of ice-cold water entirely over Mei Luji's head. Awakened by the bone-chilling water, Mei Luji slowly came to. The pain in his body was excruciating. He opened his eyes and saw Luo and Ji held tightly in Muka's embrace. Ignoring the pain in his own body, he weakly told the other to leave quickly. Seeing that even after being tortured, his teacher's first thought was of him, Luo and Ji could no longer hold back. He turned his head and told Muku that he had already given his answer to the previous question. He had decided to stay here forever. But the man was not listening to anything now, thinking that this statement was only for Mei Luji's sake. By doing this, he was trampling on his feelings. Seeing that the man would not listen to his explanation, tears streamed from Luo and Ji's eyes. But Muka thought he was so sad for Mei Luji, and his jealousy instantly intensified. Luo and Ji was unable to defend himself, quickly saying it was not like that, and bitterly begged the man to release his teacher. Hearing Luo and Ji being so submissive, Mei Luji used all his strength to shout, telling him not to do this for him, that he was not afraid to die for his country. Looking at the spirited Mei Luji, Muku was silent for a moment. Then he tightly pulled Luo and Ji into his arms again and stated that Luo and Ji was no longer the monarch of Yunla. He believed that the reason the other would have sacrificed himself for the country was due to Mei Luji's influence. He told Mei Luji that their majesty was now an ordinary person and not to use the great cause of home and country to hold him hostage, and not to delude himself into thinking that Luo and Ji could be their savior. Of course, Mei Luji would not listen to his words, because no one knew Luo and Ji better than he did. And as Luo and Ji listened to their argument, just as he was about to speak, he heard Muku ask him again if it was because he and Mei Luji were childhood friends that the other would risk coming from 1,000 miles away to save him. After hearing this, the man explained again that he and his teacher were just good friends. He hoped the other could believe him. Mei Luji, however, told him there was no need to say so much, because Muku would not understand the bond between them, and told Muku to stop trying to use him to threaten Luo and Ji, because he was not afraid of life or death. Seeing him provoke him again and again, Muku did not want to say more. He immediately ordered the guards to torture him. As soon as the words fell, a guard holding a red-hot branding iron advanced on Mei Luji. Seeing that his teacher was about to be harmed, Luo and Ji could no longer bear it. He struggled in Muku's arms, shouting no, but it was to no avail. So he struggled with all his might, pushed the man away, his strength much greater than usual. This made Muka not expect that Luo and Ji would suddenly make such a move. He was stunned for a moment, just as the red-hot branding iron was about to touch Mei Luji. Luo and Ji directly reached out and blocked it. The next second, his hand was burned by the branding iron, and the pain instantly hit him. Muka looked at the man's reddened hand, his heart aching terribly. He immediately came to his side. He carefully grabbed the man's wrist, looking at his injury. He saw that Luo and Ji's fingers were all burned, a patch of red. Muka held the other tightly in his arms, asking him why he would do such a thing when he knew it was dangerous. But Luo and Ji did not know what to say at this moment. Seeing his hesitant look, Muka thought he was in too much pain from the burn to speak. This moved Luo and Ji very much. He did not expect that, even at this time, the other was still so concerned about him. Seeing this scene, Mei Luji, from the side, angrily cursed Muku as a despicable villain and told him not to touch Luo and Ji. This action completely enraged Muku. He immediately ordered his men to torture Mei Luji. The next second, the red-hot branding iron was pressed onto Mei Luji's body, causing the man to cry out in pain. Looking at the blood trickling from his teacher's mouth and the pained expression on his face, Luo and Ji finally reacted. He pushed Muku away again and ran towards Mei Luji. He ran to the other's side, apologizing repeatedly, saying it was all his fault. Muku stood behind, watching this scene, feeling very dejected. He thought Luo and Ji had still chosen Mei Luji, and suddenly felt a sense of abandonment. Meanwhile, Luo and Ji quietly told Mei Luji to hurry back to Yunla. As he spoke, he reached out to untie the thorny ropes. Seeing this, Muka could no longer bear it. He didn't expect the man to ignore the pain and try to untie Mei Luji's ropes. He stepped forward and grabbed the man's wrist. He asked if he was crazy and stopped him. At this time, Luo and Ji's hand were already covered in wounds, bleeding. Looking at the man who was already a mess of tears, Muka's heart was filled with mixed emotions. He thought, the other is actually crying like this for someone else. So his jealousy flared up again. He angrily dragged Luo and Ji outside. The man struggled as he walked, telling the other to let him go. After a while, Muka had pulled him to his own bedchamber. But Luo and Ji was still muttering that Mei Luji was injured, that he had to go save his teacher. Hearing this, Muka was completely enraged. He threw the man to the ground, questioning him. He still had the heart to worry about others now. Since he dared to try to escape, he could not get away unscathed today. After speaking, Muku pulled out his own belt. Seeing this scene, Luo and Ji trembled with fear, constantly backing away. He cowered in a corner, bitterly begging Muka not to do this. But the other showed no mercy. He stepped forward, grabbed the man's hands, and placed them on a pillar. Since the other had cast him aside like a worn-out shoe, he didn't need to show mercy. With that, he tied the man's hands to the pillar, making him unable to move. What followed was a scene not suitable for minors. After a night of forced intimacy, by the next morning, Muku was already up and dressed. There was no trace of displeasure on his face, as if he was still savoring the pleasure of the previous night. But Luo and Ji had covered his head with the quilt. Muku turned back and dotingly patted him, but the man cried and told him to go away, as if he was disgusted by his touch. Seeing this, Muku was silent for a moment and told him that Mei Luji was still alive, so there was no need to mourn for the king of Qin in advance. At the same time, he thought to himself that before he figured out the relationship between Luo and Ji and Mei Luji, he would not let Mei Luji die so easily. Learning that his teacher was not dead, Luo and Ji angrily pulled off the quilt and argued that he was not his lover at all. But in his heart, he was very happy that his teacher was still alive. But Muka looked at him thoughtfully. The next second, he scooped him up. The man struggled, telling the other not to touch him, to put him down. Muka then threatened him that if he did not obey, he would call others to serve him. After all, with the man's current state of undress, he thought it was presentable enough. Hearing this, Luo and Ji finally realized that his body was covered in marks left by the other last night. Then, while shyly pulling the quilt tighter, he cursed Muku as a bastard. Seeing his little wife so spirited, Muka took the opportunity to tease him, asking if last night's lesson was not enough. As soon as these words were out, Luo and Ji was so scared he immediately shut his mouth. Seeing his reaction, Muku was very satisfied. He told the man to sleep for a while and not to make him angry. Luo and Ji, however, retorted stubbornly that it was clearly the other who was bullying him. Just as he finished speaking, he felt a wave of drowsiness wash over him. Soon, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Looking at the person in his arms, sleeping soundly, Muka suddenly felt a pang of pity and decided to let him off this time. He ordered his subordinates to lock Mei Luji in the dungeon and find an imperial physician to treat his injuries, not to let him die too soon. After arranging these things, Muku carried Luo and Ji to the Eastern Palace bath, preparing to take him for a medicinal bath. Seeing the other sleeping so soundly, he was about to gently put the man down. Unexpectedly, the man, half asleep, grabbed his hand and called his name. The strong Muka was a bit confused. The other had just been so resistant to him. Why was he now holding on to him and not letting go? Looking at the person in his arms, murmuring softly, Muka's heart was filled with mixed emotions. He did not know if he had a place in the other's heart. Thinking like this, he carried him into the medicinal bath. After the medicinal bath and returning to the bedchamber, Luo and Ji did not wake up for a long time. So Muka quickly called for an imperial physician to diagnose him. The imperial physician replied that Luo and Ji was just tired and would be fine in a couple of days. But as long as the poison in the man's body was not cured, it would sooner or later endanger his life. Hearing this, Muku immediately ordered the physician to develop an antidote. If he could not, he would take the physician's life. At this moment, Luo and Ji fell into a dream. In the dream was his past with Muku. Muku was happily greeting him. It seemed the two of them had known each other before. This surprised Luo and Ji for a moment, and he stood there not knowing how to respond. As he hesitated, the other reached out and took his hand, and asked him if he had forgotten his promise to show him all over the country of Yunla. And Luo and Ji, upon hearing this, subconsciously and happily agreed, as if it were a long-standing agreement between the two. However, the dream came to an abrupt end here. Luo and Ji also woke up with a start. The next second, he sat up in bed with a jolt. Was what just happened a dream or reality? He was a bit confused. At this moment, he saw Muko before him, calling his name. Only then did he realize that everything just now was a dream. It turned out that only in dreams could the two of them get along so harmoniously. Looking at the startled Luo and Ji, Muko quickly grabbed his hand and asked him who he had just dreamed of. Luo and Ji, however, prevaricated, saying he had not dreamed of anyone that he could not remember. At the same time, he was very puzzled in his heart. Why did he have a memory of agreeing with the other to travel all over Yunla? Yet he had no impression of it at all. And Muku at the side was a little angry. He thought the man was thinking of Mei Luji even in his dreams. The other was so eager to return to Yunla. Was it for this person? These words stunned Luo and Ji on the spot. However, the face that appeared before his eyes was not Mei Luji's, but Muku's. But Muku did not know his thoughts. Instead, with a dark face, he asked if he and Mei Luji had had a relationship. Luo and Ji was very surprised to hear this, and immediately argued that they were friends who grew up together, not the kind of relationship he was implying. Moreover, Mei Luji had a family in their country, but he knew that no matter how he explained, the other would not believe him. Sure enough, Muka thought that if the two really had no relationship, he would not be so nervous. This left Luo and Ji at a loss for words for a moment. After a while, he replied in shame and anger that he was originally going to marry a wife, so of course he did not have a preference for men. But after he said it, he immediately realized that he had had an unpleasant argument with Muku about marrying a wife before. To bring it up again now would probably only make him angrier. However, Muku did not mention this matter again. He told him to rest well and not to worry about other things. But Luo and Ji was still persistent, asking him to let Mei Luji go, and explaining that Mei Luji had only come to save him out of a sense of duty between a ruler and a subject. Seeing the man's stubborn look, Muku could only forcefully tell him to apply medicine first. Seeing the other still clutching his collar and begging him, an idea suddenly came to his mind. He told Luo and Ji that as long as he was obedient, Mei Luji would naturally be safe. As he spoke, he pulled the quilt over and tucked the man in considerately. Luo and Ji looked at the other's charming smile and knew that he probably had no good intentions. He was about to say something, but did not know where to start. Muku saw him clutching at him, hesitating to speak, and pretended to be angry, asking if he was unwilling. Seeing this, Luo and Ji had to temporarily put aside his doubts. He slowly removed his hand from the other's body. For now, he could only take it one step at a time. Only by placating Muku would Mei Luji be safe. Thinking this, he pressed himself tightly into the other's embrace. The scene changes to the next day. Luo and Ji was awakened by a servant in the crown prince's bedchamber. The man groggily opened his eyes, still thinking about yesterday's events. He then sat up and told the maid that he would wash up himself. However, the next second, he could not stand up because his legs were weak and trembling. Seeing this, the maid understood. She put down the medicine in her hand, said that she would serve him, and told him that this bowl of nourishing soup was specially ordered by Muku for him to finish. Hearing this, Luo and Ji immediately asked the maid where the man had gone. At the same time, he was still thinking that although Muku would not kill Mei Luji, he would not have him while taking care of either. He had to find a way to bring some medicine to his teacher. At this time, the maid replied that Muku was at the Imperial Academy, reviewing lessons with the princes, and would not be back for a while. Luo and Ji thought for a moment, then made an excuse of going for a walk and turned to leave. But as soon as he stepped out of the room, he found 2 guards following him. Luo and Ji said frankly that he just wanted to walk alone. But the 2 guards explained that this was Muku's order. This instantly soured Luo and Ji's mood. Sure enough, Muku still did not trust him and had sent people to watch him. Thinking this, he did not want to make things difficult for the guards, so he let them follow. After a while, they arrived at the entrance of the dungeon. A guard at the side, however, would not let him in. Seeing this, Luo and Ji immediately threatened them that the Crown Prince had once said he could go anywhere in the Eastern Palace. Were they going to defy the Crown Prince's order? Just as the guards were in a dilemma, Luo and Ji forced his way in. He thought to himself, as long as he delivered the medicine to Mei Luji and left immediately, he would not be misunderstood by Muku again. Meanwhile, Muku was teaching his younger brothers calligraphy. His fine handwriting drew praise from all the princes. He instructed his younger brothers that if they wanted to practice good calligraphy, they just needed to have a steady hand, hide the brush tip at the beginning of a stroke, and practice more. As he was diligently teaching the princes, a guard hurried in to report that Luo and Ji had broken into the dungeon. Hearing this, the man was very angry. With a snap, he put down his brush and slammed the table in a rage. On the other side, Luo and Ji was still searching hard for Mei Luji in the dungeon, muttering to himself that this dungeon was dark and long. Suddenly, a clamor of cries for help came from outside. He turned his head to look and was surprised to find that the dungeon was on fire. It was a sea of flames everywhere. However, that was not the worst of it. At some point, a group of assassins had rushed out of the dungeon. The guards were chasing them with swords. In the dungeon, it was a game of cat and mouse. Watching the two groups fighting, Luo and Ji was very puzzled. Why would assassins suddenly appear in the dungeon? At the same time, he was worried that the fire was so big, and the guards were too busy to help. If this continued, his teacher might be burned to death. After all, Mei Luji was imprisoned because of him. He could not die. In a short while, Luo and Ji saw that the guards were all controlled by these assassins. He was very anxious. Suddenly, he found a short knife on the ground, dropped by someone. Seeing this, Luo and Ji immediately picked it up. Looking at the short knife, he thought to himself that the fire was getting bigger and bigger, and he had to rescue Mei Luji quickly. So he began his long search again. After a good while, he finally found Mei Luji in a cell in a corner. The other was very surprised how he got here. Luo and Ji explained that he came to bring him medicine, and that the dungeon was on fire, so it would be very dangerous if they did not escape. Seeing that the man had personally come to rescue him, Mei Luji was very moved. But because he was now covered in injuries, Luo and Ji was worried if he could hold on. But the other told him not to worry, they were all superficial wounds, and the fire was part of his plan. Hearing this, Luo and Ji was very shocked. He did not expect that those assassins were arranged by the other. Mei Luji continued to explain that those assassins were death-sworn warriors he had trained. He had originally thought that this plan to rescue Luo and Ji had failed, so he had the death-sworn warriors proceed with the plan to rescue him first. But he did not expect Luo and Ji to happen to come to the prison to see him. He felt this must be the arrangement of heaven. Heaven could not bear to let the other stay here and be insulted. After speaking, he grabbed the man's shoulder and told him to take this opportunity to escape with him. Unexpectedly, Luo and Ji did not respond directly. Instead, he slowly pushed his hand away and told him to leave the dungeon with him first. When the two reached the dungeon entrance, Luo and Ji told him the escape route and told him to leave quickly. However, Mei Luji grabbed the man's hand and told him to leave with him. Luo and Ji refused again, saying that he had already decided to stay. He also asked the other to take good care of Yinyu, but the other was still not reconciled, claiming that his only monarch was him. Hearing this, Luo and Ji told Mei Luji not to act on impulse, that Muku would not let him go. If he insisted on taking him, then neither of them would be able to leave. This made Mei Luji wonder in his heart whether the man could not leave, or did not want to leave in the first place. Without another word, he roughly pulled the man, wanting to leave. As the two were pulling and tugging, a wooden beam, having caught fire, was about to fall and hit someone. In this critical moment, Luo and Ji, with quick eyes and hands, immediately pushed Mei Luji away. At the same time, outside the dungeon, Muku had also rushed over, asking the guards what was going on. The guard immediately replied that because the dungeon was on fire and assassins had broken in, Luo Shaoqing had not come out yet. Hearing this, Muku immediately, despite everyone's attempts to stop him, rushed into the dungeon. He happened to see a wooden beam about to fall on Luo and Ji. The scene changes. Luo and Ji, who had been unconscious for a day, dreamed that Muku had protected him regardless of everything, and suddenly woke up from the dream. The scene in the dream scared him so much that he sat up in bed, panting heavily. At this time, a maid came to report that he had been unconscious for a day and a night. Luo and Ji was very surprised. He recalled that in the dungeon, the roof beam had collapsed, but he was unharmed. Could it be that in the dream just now, it was really Muku who saved him? But the maid told him that she did not know either. It turned out that Muko had already instructed them to let the man rest well and not to talk too much. Hearing this, Luo and Ji felt a little disappointed. He thought it was not Muko who saved him. He did not understand what he was expecting. If Muko had really seen him leaving the dungeon with Mei Luji, he would probably have wanted to execute him. How could he have saved him? So Luo and Ji asked the maid how Mei Luji was. After hearing that his teacher was safe, the man was instantly relieved. But the maid felt a little sorry for Muko, because as soon as the man opened his eyes, he only thought of others and did not ask about Muko's well-being at all. At this moment, Muko suddenly burst in and told the maid not to talk so much. He then directly accused Luo and Ji, saying that he had underestimated him. He did not expect that in order to save someone, he would even collude with assassins to set fire to the dungeon and even stage a jailbreak. The man was about to argue when he saw the bandage wrapped around Muko's hand. He quickly got up, lifted the other's sleeve, and asked hopefully if it was he who had saved him. But Muko stubbornly replied that it had nothing to do with him. But Luo and Ji knew that it must have something to do with him. At the same time, he thought to himself, although the other misunderstood his collusion with the assassins, he still risked his life to save him. The other had always been protecting him. Even though he had abducted him at the beginning, there was a reason for it, because Muko had never deceived him, nor had he ever really wanted to harm him. Thinking this, Luo and Ji explained to Muko that he just wanted to bring medicine to Mei Luji, who knew he would encounter a fire in the dungeon. He was worried that his teacher would be burned to death, so he wanted to bring him out. Because Mei Luji had once saved his life, he regarded him as a benefactor. Therefore, there were absolutely no other feelings between them. Hearing this, Muko turned around with a pained heart and held Luo and Ji's hand. He sighed, thinking that this man always had a way of making his heart ache. He then promised the other that he would not kill Mei Luji and would also send someone to treat him, but on the condition that Luo and Ji was not allowed to shed another tear for the other, because only he could make him cry. As he spoke, his hands began to get restless, untying the man's clothes. After being so intimate all night, the little birds outside the window the next day were envious. At this time, Luo and Ji slowly woke up in Muko's arms. Seeing this, the man considerately asked him if he was tired. Luo and Ji was a little shy after hearing this and quickly shook his head, saying he was not tired. As soon as the words fell, Muko pulled him into an embrace, teasing him if it was because he had not tried hard enough. Seeing the shy look of the person in his arms, Muko stopped teasing him and told the man to get up quickly, that he would take him to the dungeon to release the person. This made Luo and Ji very grateful to the other for finally agreeing to release his teacher. However, Muko was thinking in his heart that no matter how much he did for the man, he only received the man's gratitude, not his entirety. In a short while, Muko led Luo and Ji by the hand to the dungeon. Mei Luji was very shocked to see this scene. At this time, Muko ordered the guards to open the door. Mei Luji's shock immediately turned to anger. He thought the other was trying to play tricks again and cursed him as a despicable villain. Luo and Ji walked to his side and quickly explained that things were not as he thought. He told his teacher that Muko had decided not to pursue the matter of him sneaking into the palace. They were here to let him go. But Mei Luji did not believe that Muko would be so kind. It must be that Luo and Ji had agreed to some condition. He then quickly told the other not to forget who he was, reminding him that he was the monarch of Yunla, and that even in death, he could not be with the enemy. He told Luo and Ji not to be threatened by Muko. Coming to save him this time was a desperate gamble. Now, all his efforts were in vain. Dying together was better than being humiliated by others and losing his integrity. Standing to the side, Muko became furious upon hearing these words. He told Mei Luji that if he was so eager to die, then he would grant him his wish. Hearing this, Luo and immediately reached out to stop Muko, thinking to himself that if he didn't make Mei Luji give up completely, he would surely do something foolish again. Thus, the man immediately told his teacher to return to his own country and continue to assist his younger brother, Yingyu, or to live in seclusion and never come back. He told him that he was just a coward who clung to life and was not worthy of him risking his life for protection. Mei Luji could hardly believe it after hearing this, wondering if the man was truly a coward or if his mind had been bewitched by his enemy. Then, he furiously grabbed Luo Ange by the neck, shouting that he was a traitor. A scholar can be killed, but not humiliated. He couldn't just watch him bow and scrape before the enemy. Mei Luji was choking Luo Ange so hard that he couldn't even breathe. Muko quickly rushed forward and gave the man a heavy slap, stopping his violent behavior. The next second, the man fell to the ground as if he had been hit by a train. Seeing Luo Ange coughing incessantly, Muku quickly knelt down to ask if he was alright. But just as Muku was showing concern for Luo Ange's injuries, Mei Luji was glaring viciously at the two of them, feeling that Muku had ruined his plans. So he slowly got up, intending to launch a sneak attack. But to his surprise, his powerful strike was easily dodged by the other. Muku then took the opportunity to throw him to the ground again. To vent Luo Ange's anger, Muku decided to teach the man a lesson. But just as his fist, as large as a sandbag, was about to land on the man, he was stopped by Luo Ange, who was at the side. He came forward and held back the furious Muku, hoping he wouldn't hit his teacher anymore. Out of respect for his promise to Luo Ange, Muku didn't resort to violence. He found Mei Luji's act of using patriotic duty to emotionally blackmail Luo Ange truly ridiculous. This thought deeply moved Luo Ange. Only then did he realize that only Muku had always understood and protected him. Immediately, Muku ordered his servants to tie up Mei Luji, throw him onto a carriage, and send him back to his country. After hearing the order, several servants immediately followed Muku's instructions to restrain Mei Luji. However, Mei Luji refused to give up and continued to struggle fiercely. As he was being taken away, he didn't forget to curse Luo Ange as a traitor. This made the man feel extremely wronged. He had been wholeheartedly dedicated to his country, only to end up with such a result. At this moment, Muku noticed that Luo Ange's mood was a bit down and immediately came forward to comfort him. But the other just wanted to be alone for a while, so he turned and walked back. As he passed by a prison cell, he suddenly noticed that it was decorated to rival a royal palace. Muku told him that this was the cell he had suggested renovating back then, and asked if he still remembered. Luo Ange never expected that because of a casual remark he made, Muku had actually kept this cell until now. The man was so moved that he shed tears. Muku thought he was upset again over the matter with Mei Luji and immediately held his face in his hands to comfort him. Luo Ange quickly explained that it wasn't because of his teacher. He wanted to say he was crying because he was moved, but was too embarrassed to say it out loud. Seeing the man hesitating to speak, Muku seemed to understand. He then realized why the other was crying. Seeing that Muku had guessed his thoughts, Luo Ange stammered even more, unable to speak. Unexpectedly, Muku then moved close to his ear and suggested they go into the cell and try something. At these audacious words, Luo Ange's face instantly turned red. He shyly pushed Muku away and fell onto the bed, huffily telling him not to talk nonsense. He was just feeling emotional revisiting an old place. Seeing Luo Ange acting like a child, Muku sighed. He then dotingly patted the man's head and told him to get up quickly, because the cell was damp and his body hadn't fully recovered yet. Just then, Luo Ange's head suddenly started to hurt. Seeing this, Muku quickly supported him. He nervously asked if his head was hurting again. Luo Ange said that his headaches had been getting worse recently. Upon hearing this, Muku immediately swept him up in his arms. This move was overflowing with boyfriend power. But Luo Ange was very shy. He told the man to put him down quickly because there were so many people outside and it was just a minor ailment, no need to make such a fuss. But Muku threatened him, saying if he didn't obey, he wouldn't be so polite. At the same time, he was silently anxious because the man's condition was getting more and more serious, and the imperial physician had no clue about the antidote. If this continued, the other's life might be in danger. The next morning, just as Luo Ange woke up, a maid brought over a medicinal meal specially ordered by Muku and asked him to drink it. This moved the man deeply. In this world, probably no one could resist such unreserved sincerity. He reckoned that Mei Luji should have returned to Yunla by now. But the monarch he had high hopes for was willing to humble himself before the crown prince of an enemy nation. Luo Ange thought his teacher must be utterly disappointed in him. At this thought, he started coughing incessantly again. Seeing this, the maid quickly urged him to take care of his health, otherwise Muku would worry. But Luo Ange didn't take it to heart because he had been in poor health since childhood and medicine was of no use. Immediately, the maid went to the study to report to Mu-ko. Luo Ange had taken the medicinal meal, but his health showed no improvement. She guessed it was because he was depressed, which was affecting his physical condition. Muka said nothing after hearing this. But after the maid left, an attendant by his side came up with an idea. He believed that Lord Luo's emotional distress was mostly due to homesickness. Why not bring over the attendants who used to serve him to continue their service? With familiar people around him, his mood would naturally improve. Muka nodded repeatedly after hearing this, praising it as a possibly good idea. The next second, he wrote a letter and had it sent to Yunla to Luo Yinyu to arrange for 2 obedient and sensible young attendants. The scene changes. Inside the Yunla Imperial Palace, Luo Yinyu quickly received the letter, but he was puzzled. Why did Muka want him to pick 2 obedient and sensible young attendants to send over? Was he implying that he had done something wrong and that an important court minister had found leverage against him? Song Guang, who was beside him, saw this and told him not to panic. Don't forget what he usually taught him. It was just a request for a few people. He also told Luo Yinyu not to lose his imperial composure, because with one look, Song Guang immediately understood Mu Ku's intention. The other party wanted these few people, probably to please Luo Ange. After hearing this, Luo Yinyu also realized. It turned out that his imperial brother's relationship with Mu Ku was the same as his relationship with Song Guang. Song Guang thought this was a good opportunity to arrange for someone to eliminate Luo Ange completely. But Luo Yinyu couldn't bear to do it. He felt that his imperial brother could no longer return, so there was no need to be so ruthless. But Song Guang believed that Luo Ange had already latched on a Mu Ku, a powerful ally. There was no guarantee that one day, Yinyu's position as emperor wouldn't have to be returned to him. As he spoke, he pinched the man's chin, asking if he wanted to go back to being that powerless second prince. He emphasized again that this was a rare opportunity that couldn't be missed. Hearing this, Luo Yinyu couldn't refute it and had no choice but to let Song Guang do as he pleased. After hearing the other agree, the man gave a wicked smile. Then, he told the other to leave the matter entirely to him. He didn't need to interfere. This time, he would definitely not let Luo Ange get away. Meanwhile, in the eastern palace of a foreign country, Luo Ange was soaking in a hot spring. A servant explained to him that this was a medicinal bath specially prepared by the imperial physician at Mu Ku's request, using more than 10 types of precious herbs. He was told to soak peacefully for an hour. But Luo Ange felt that such a minor ailment didn't warrant such fine medicinal ingredients. He decided he must persuade him when he returned. Thinking about it, he fell asleep. After a while, Mu Ku returned. He dismissed the servants. As soon as he saw Luo Ange like this, he knew that the other's hypersomnia was getting worse recently. At the same time, he secretly resolved that no matter what, he could not let anything happen to him. He had just picked up a lock of the man's dark hair and brought it to his lips to kiss when the man woke up. He saw Muka's furrowed brow. He reached out and caressed the other's face, asking him why he looked so worried and if something had happened. Muka told him that he just saw him sleeping so soundly and was afraid he might choke on the water. But Luo Ange thought nothing of it. He felt he was just so sleepy recently because he had caught a cold. He wasn't usually like this. At this point, Mu Ku reminded the man to get up quickly, because he was going to take him to see 2 people. This left Luo Ange a bit baffled, not understanding who the other wanted him to meet. Seeing the man still not getting up, Mu Ku offered to carry him out. At these words, the frightened man immediately stood up from the water. In no time, Luo Ange, having changed his clothes, thought to himself, Mu Ku is being so mysterious. Has he come up with some new trick? Just as he was asking where the people were, 2 people suddenly walked towards him. He saw that these 2 men had delicate features, were dressed in Yunla attire, and were even calling him Your Majesty. Seeing this, Luo Ange was extremely shocked. He never expected that the 2 of them would appear here. As soon as the 2 saw him, they immediately knelt on the ground, crying and saying how much they missed him. However, from under the sleeve of one of them, a subtle, hard-to-detect expression was revealed. It turned out these 2 were Luo Ange's former attendants, a Yu and a Ting. Luo Ange quickly went forward to help them up and asked with confusion why they were here. The 2 told him that Mu Ku had sent people to Yunla to ask for attendants that he liked. As soon as the 2 of them heard, they volunteered to come. Seeing that the man was still a bit confused and hadn't quite processed it, Muku also stepped forward to explain. Because he saw that the other was unhappy all day, he guessed that the servants here were not attending to him well, so he thought of this way to please him. Hearing this, Luo Ange was very moved. He didn't understand why Muku was always so good to him, but the other told him not to overthink it, explaining that it was probably because he owed him from past life. But Luo Ange was worried that with the other being so good to him, he would have no way to repay him in the future. After hearing this, Muku directly took the man's hand and walked towards the bed, saying that there were many ways he could repay him. After speaking, he pulled down the bed curtains and ordered the two attendants, a Yu and a Ting, to withdraw. However, at this moment, a Ting turned back and looked at them with a sinister gaze, hoping in his heart that Luo Ange wouldn't blame him. The next morning, when Luo Ange woke up, he immediately had a Yu help him up. A Yu teased that his spirits were much better now than before. Back in Yunla, especially at this hour in winter, he could never get up. These words made Luo Ange think of Muku. If it weren't for the nourishing soups and medicines he sent daily, his body wouldn't have been able to withstand all this. Then a Yu added that Muku took such good care of him, showing he was truly sincere and a person worth entrusting oneself to. These words immediately made the man blush with shyness. He quickly told Yu not to speak nonsense, because this place was not like their own country. They must remember to be cautious in their words and actions. At the same time, he repeatedly instructed him not to call him Your Majesty anymore in the future. Just call him Young Master. A Yu nodded repeatedly after hearing this. Luo Ange thought to himself that these two attendants were still young, and he would have to watch over them more in the future to prevent them from being used against him. Just then, he noticed a Ting standing there as if he had something on his mind, so he called out to him. A Ting immediately turned his head in a panic. Seeing this, Luo Ange asked with concern if something was wrong, because he seemed unsettled. A Ting stammered in reply that he was just not used to being here and missed his family. As soon as he said it, he recalled the scene back in Yunla where Song Guang threatened him with his younger sister. If he couldn't kill Luo Ange, then his own sister would be killed by Song Guang. Seeing him so lost in thought, Luo Ange stepped forward and called his name again. Only then did a Ting snap back to reality. He explained that he was just homesick and asked him not to mind. Luo Ange just stepped forward and patted his head, then instructed him to go for a walk in the garden with him, thinking that the other was truly just lost in thought because of his family. He didn't say anything more. In a short while, the two of them arrived at the Imperial Garden. Luo Ange stared at the pond in front of him, lost in thought. Even you could see Muku's feelings for him clearly. He didn't know how much longer he could deceive himself. Meanwhile, a Ting, standing behind him, looked at his back and plotted how to kill him. Since he had no opportunity to poison him, he had to find another chance. At this moment, a Ting observed that the water in the pond was very deep and Luo Ange happened to not know how to swim. He might as well push him into the pond. Thinking of this, he reached out to push the other into the water. At this critical moment, a Yu suddenly shouted that the kitchen had made Luo Ange's favorite pastries, and then walked over carrying them. So Luo Ange immediately turned around. He immediately saw a Ting's hand suspended in midair and asked what was wrong. Seeing this, a Ting could only explain awkwardly that the corner of his robe was dirty, and he was helping him wipe it. A Ting's actions left Luo Ange very puzzled. He felt that the others seemed more reckless than before, but he didn't take it to heart and even helped a Ting up, telling him to go rest in the pavilion. In a short while, a Yu stood by with a plate of pastries and told Luo Ange that Muku had specially ordered them for him. Luo Ange was about to pick up a pastry and put it in his mouth. When he turned his head, he saw a Yu's greedy look, so he invited him to eat together. Then he picked up another piece and gave it to a Ting, telling him not to just stand there foolishly and to sit down quickly. Seeing this, a Ting was very moved. He remembered that his family was poor when he was young and couldn't afford pastries, so he could only go into the woods to pick a few sweet leaves to satisfy his craving. Later, after he started serving Luo Ange, because he never treated him as a servant, he finally knew what pastries tasted like. But now, he had to repay kindness with enmity. At this thought, a Ting's eyes filled with tears. Luo Ange looked at him, crying while eating the pastry, and thought he was still missing his family. Immediately, a Ting thought of his younger sister, because his sister loved sweets the most. Just then, Luo Ange interrupted his reminiscence and asked about his sister. He was truly envious that they, as siblings had each other to rely on. Hearing this, Ating was a little afraid to look at him. He immediately turned his head away and replied that his sister was well and had just gotten married before the new year. At the same time, he clenched his fists, because Song Guang was ruthless. If he didn't follow his orders, his sister would have no chance of survival. So he quickly changed the subject, telling Luo Ange that he had seen some leaves in the garden earlier that he had tasted as a child and wanted to pick some for him to try. Immediately, he ran to a tree, thinking that this was the oleander that his mother told him not to eat when he was a child, because everything from the leaves to the petals was highly poisonous. With that thought, Ating picked some and brought them to Luo Ange, intending to poison him with them. He handed the oleander to the man and lied that it was as sweet as sugarcane when chewed. Hearing this, Luo Ange, without any suspicion, picked up a piece of the oleander leaf and chewed it in his mouth. Seeing this, Ating thought to himself that his sister was his only family. He could only let Luo Ange down. In a short while, Luo Ange, who had eaten the oleander leaf, felt that it was very bitter, not sweet as the other had said. But the naive man still didn't suspect anything, thinking that Ating had just gotten it mixed up. Ating immediately explained guiltily that he must have been too young back then and remembered it wrong. Hearing this, Luo Ange didn't blame him. He then told them it was getting late and they should go back for their meal. The group then walked into the room, talking and laughing. Seeing this scene, Muku thought to himself that these two attendants were quite capable. Luo Ange's mood had indeed improved a lot. With that thought, he immediately teased the man, saying that he was so happy talking and laughing with his two attendants in the Imperial Garden today that he had probably long forgotten about him. Luo Ange replied that it was because you and Ating were young and not used to being here, so he was showing them around. These words immediately made Muku jealous, teasing him for favoring the new and forgetting the old. He hoped he could also have the honor of being shown around by him. As soon as he finished speaking, a blush appeared on Luo Ange's face. He immediately remembered that dream. In the dream, he had promised to show Muku the beautiful mountains and rivers of Yunla. Just then, the man hugged him and held his hand. This made Luo Ange immediately pull his hand back shyly and sit back down on the stool. Seeing this, Muku was very disappointed, because even now, the man was still being distant with him, who knew that in the next second, Luo Ange would promise him that if there was a chance in the future, he would definitely take Muku to tour the great mountains and rivers of Yunla. At these words, the man was very surprised. Then, with a serious expression, he told him to remember his words today. However, Luo Ange changed the subject by saying he was starving. While stuffing food into his mouth, he told the man not to speak while eating or sleeping. Muku looked at his adorable appearance and was moved. He patted his head and told him not to forget the promise he had just made. Luo Ange was about to answer when his hand suddenly started to tremble uncontrollably. The next second, he clutched his stomach in pain. Seeing this, Muku immediately picked him up, looking very anxious. But the man still comforted him, saying he might have just eaten something bad and told him not to worry. However, he fainted right after saying that. This made Muku extremely nervous. He immediately ordered his servants to find the imperial physician. Looking at the man in his arms who was in great pain, he comforted him that he would be all right. After a while, Luo Ange, having been treated, lay on the bed, still crying out in pain. So Muku gently helped the man up. He personally fed him medicine. The man was also very obedient, drinking the entire bowl of medicine in a few gulps. But as soon as he drank it, he threw it all up. Muku explained to him that it was an emetic and he would be fine once he vomited out the poisonous substance. As he spoke, he used a handkerchief to wipe the residue from the corner of his mouth. Seeing Muku's considerate manner, Luo Ange thought to himself that since he was young, there had always been people trying their best to kill him. Now that he was no longer in that position, they still refused to let him go. Thinking of this, he leaned weakly against Muku's chest and asked the imperial physician what poison he had been given this time. He replied that he had accidentally ingested oleander. Because the amount was small and the treatment was timely, there was no major issue. Upon hearing the word oleander, Luo Ange immediately thought of Ating. And Muku was still blaming him for eating things carelessly, asking if he didn't know that oleander was poisonous. But the man's mind was in chaos. He never thought that even his own attendant, Ating, would want to harm him. Seeing the man remain silent, Muku immediately said angrily that from now on, all meals in the Eastern Palace would be strictly supervised, and there would be absolutely no mistakes. This matter must have been planned by someone. He wanted to see who was so bold as to dare to carry out an assassination in the Eastern Palace. With that, he was about to order the guards to investigate the matter with him and get to the bottom of it. Unexpectedly, Luo Ange grabbed him and whispered for him not to go. Seeing the man's pitiful appearance, Muku immediately turned around and held his hand with heartache. He gently kissed the man's forehead and promised that no one would ever hurt him again. Hearing this, Luo Ange was moved to tears. He had never thought that the other's arms would become the only place where he could feel at ease. Immediately, Muku called his name while lowering the bed curtains. And within the red bed curtains, another enchanting scene unfolded. This scene, not suitable for minors, made the little birds outside envious again. But after their passionate encounter, Muku got up from the bed. He gently leaned over the man's cheek and dotingly told him that with him around, he had nothing to fear. He then turned and walked out, thinking to himself that anyone who dared to harm Luo Ange shouldn't even think about leaving the Eastern Palace alive. He walked outside the door and asked the guard what exactly had happened to Luo Ange today and how he could have accidentally ingested oleander for no reason. The frightened guard immediately knelt on the ground and quickly explained that Lord Luo was taking a walk in the garden and didn't like them following closely, only asking them to wait outside the garden. Only a Yu and a Ting were with him. He asked Muku if he should arrest them. After hearing this, Muku told the guard not to alert the enemy yet. If it really was them, Luo Ange would surely interrogate them himself first. With that, he ordered the guards to keep an eye on the two attendants. The next day, a ray of sunlight shone on the man's face. Luo Ange slowly opened his eyes. Seeing him awake, a servant immediately came to report that Muku had gone to the cabinet for a meeting today and asked if he had any orders. Luo Ange told the servant to call a Ting to the small study to grind ink for him. He wanted to practice calligraphy. Thinking about yesterday's events still made him sad. He was already a captive, yet they still wouldn't let him go, even using the people closest to him to hurt him. After Luo Ange arrived at the small study, he asked the Ting if the ink was ready. Unexpectedly, these words startled the Ting, who was in a daze, causing him to knock over the inkstone. Seeing this, he immediately knelt on the ground, stammering that he didn't do it on purpose and begging for forgiveness. Luo Ange slowly walked to his side and knelt down, comforting him that it was not a big deal, and asked him why he was suddenly so flustered. A Ting immediately explained that he was just blaming himself for not being able to handle such a small task. At the same time, he felt a bit strange because Luo Ange's expression was normal. He wondered if they hadn't found out yet that he was the one who administered the poison. At this moment, Luo Ange spoke gently again, saying he didn't blame him. This made a Ting breathe a sigh of relief, repeatedly praising him for his magnanimity and kindness. However, the next second, the man's expression turned serious as he scolded. Was it because he was merciful that the other would cause trouble without any scruples? These words made a Ting suddenly falter, explaining that he didn't and kowtowing frantically to the man. Luo Ange directly pointed out that the leaves he called sweet were the highly poisonous oleander. Who knew that a Ting still wouldn't admit it, only saying that he had mistaken them. But Luo Ange had seen through everything. If the other truly didn't know, he wouldn't be so flustered. But he still softened. He told the Ting to get up and said that he was just teasing him. After all, he had watched him grow up. He believed that the other was kind-hearted and timid and would not plot against him. And this matter would never be mentioned again. A Ting was very moved and stood there in a daze. He called out to Luo Ange, then stepped forward and grabbed his hand, wanting to tell him the truth. However, just as he was about to speak, he thought of Song Guang's ruthlessness. If he let him know that he had betrayed him, he would definitely not spare his sister. So he absolutely could not say anything. Luo Ange watched him hesitate for a long time, and just as he was wondering, a Ting glossed it over with an apology again. Seeing his hesitant appearance, Luo Ange decided to let it go. After all, since the person behind the scenes could order a Ting to assassinate him, they must have made thorough preparations. For now, he could only keep a Ting by his side to avoid alerting the enemy. At the same time, he would investigate in secret. This time, he was determined to expose the person behind this. Meanwhile, in the study, Muku smashed everything he could on the table. He said angrily that it was indeed hard to guard against a thief from within. After some thought, he told the guard that a few days ago, the Empress had sent over a pure white fox, which was being kept in the backyard. He told them to take Luo Ange to see it and to find a way to keep Luo Ange in the yard for a while longer. Then he ordered the guard to take advantage of Luo Ange's absence to lock a Ting in the dungeon. He wanted to interrogate him personally. In a short while, a maid came to tell Luo Ange to go to the backyard. The man was very happy, as he had never seen a white fox before. The maid explained that Muku had specially requested the fox from the Empress to give to him. This made the man very shy. He coughed a few times and then, feigning composure, told the maid to take him to see it. As Luo Ange walked away, two guards immediately jumped out. They covered Ting's mouth and were about to take him away. Seeing this, Ting felt that things were not good. Muku must have found out something. He immediately thought of his sister. He must not reveal the mastermind. So Ting struggled free from the two guards. He then pulled out a poison pill from his sleeve and swallowed it without hesitation. Before he died, he thought of Luo Ange again. He felt he had let him down. By this time, it was too late for the guards to stop him. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. On the other side, Muku saw only the guards return and immediately asked what had happened. The guards stammered an explanation that they hadn't expected the man to have poison hidden on him. It was a moment of carelessness, and he asked for punishment. Muku sighed after hearing this and told the guards to drag a Ting out and bury him. He also threatened them that if they let slip even half a word, he would cut out their tongues. He also instructed the guards not to be negligent with Yu and to investigate him thoroughly. If he was also involved in something fishy, he was to be killed as well. Soon, it was time for the noon meal. Seeing Luo Ange come to dine while holding the fox, Muku immediately teased him, asking if he was finally willing to come back. The man put the fox on the ground and excitedly told him that it was the first time he had seen such a beautiful fox. The little white fox was very cute and even knew how to bow and make a fist. No wonder Luo Ange liked it so much. Muku was a bit surprised to see the little fox so obedient in his hands. The other told him that he had raised a red fox when he was a child, and it was also very obedient. Seeing Luo Ange so happy, Muku immediately pushed his luck, asking for a reward. But the man was dismissive, asking him in return who would actively ask for a gift in return. Muku looked at the white fox and suddenly felt a bit annoyed. He immediately pulled Luo Ange over, feeling jealous, because the other had been doting on the white fox since he came in, making him very envious. At these words, Luo Ange immediately pushed the man away shyly, telling him not to be unreasonable. After all, it was just a fox. When he sat down at the stool ready to eat, Luo Ange realized that only Yu was there. Ting was gone. Muku lied to him that Ting had an urgent family matter today. He saw that he looked flustered, so he took it upon himself to send someone to escort him back. He was probably already out of the city by now. Muku also said that he had wanted to let him inform Luo Ange, but he seemed unable to wait even for a moment. Hearing this, Luo Ange was lost in thought. In the end, he decided to let it be. But even if Ting had his difficulties, he would absolutely not let go of the mastermind who wanted to harm him. Seeing his displeased expression, Muku asked if he was unhappy and comforted him that he would go to Yunla again to find a few more young attendants that he liked. Luo Ange pouted, using the excuse that the meals had been nothing but clear soup and plain water for the past 2 days, and he had no appetite. He hoped the kitchen could serve a few more meat dishes tomorrow. Muku directly refused him, because the imperial physician had instructed that since he had just been poisoned, his stomach was weak and he couldn't have any meat for 3 days. He also pointed out that he had just promised to repay him for the white fox. Was he throwing a tantrum now and trying to go back on his word? Hearing this, Luo Ange immediately retorted that he was talking nonsense and that he had not promised him anything. Hearing this, Muku pulled the man into his arms. In that case, he would have to personally help the man fulfill his promise. As he spoke, he picked up a piece of food and put it in his own mouth. Seeing this, the man was confused. Just as he was about to ask what he was doing, he saw the other suddenly lift his chin gently. The next second, he was feeding him mouth to mouth, and the shadows of the two people by the window were also full of passion, leaving much to the imagination. Time quickly passed to the evening. Luo Ange was seen sneaking into the imperial kitchen, muttering that he had pretended to be full during the day, but now he was hungry again. If Muku found out, he would definitely make fun of him. and he would probably bring over some medicinal soup. It was better for him to come to the small kitchen to get some meat himself. However, at this moment, for some reason, the scene of the two of them together during the day appeared in his mind. He quickly told himself to forget it. He then looked at the clay pot on the table, thinking it would be great if there was some dried venison or something similar. Thinking of this, he carefully lifted the pot lid. Unexpectedly, a rustling sound suddenly came from behind him. This made the man immediately ask loudly in a nervous voice, "Who's there?" He turned around and saw a young eunuch standing there, constantly stuffing something into his mouth. Luo Ange was very scared and stammered, asking what he was doing here. The young eunuch told him his name was Ji Xiang, and he was also in the kitchen to eat because he was hungry. Hearing this name, Luo Ange felt it was familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere. Ji Xiang continued to explain that because he broke a glass bottle while cleaning in the morning, he was punished with confinement and hadn't eaten all day. Hearing this, Luo Ange's anxious heart finally settled. But Ji Xiang thought that he had also been punished with no food, so he gave him a steamed bun and told Luo Ange to eat with him. Seeing this, the man was very surprised. He thought to himself that this child must have just entered the Eastern Palace and mistook him for a palace guard. He then pulled Ji Xiang along, telling him that since they had made it to the kitchen, of course, they had to find something good to eat, not just gnaw on cold, hard-steamed buns. But Ji Xiang was scared and wanted to stop him, because if the kitchen manager found out, they would be beaten. As soon as he finished speaking, Luo Ange's stomach rumbled. This noise made Ji Xiang think that this guard seemed to be in a worse state than himself. He then looked around fearfully, afraid that someone would come. Meanwhile, Luo Ange was searching everywhere for good food. In a short while, he found 2 large chicken legs. So, he immediately stuffed one into his own mouth and asked Ji Xiang if he wanted some. After hesitating for a moment, the other squatted in the corner with Luo Ange and started eating. Ji Xiang told him to hurry up and leave after eating, and that they must not be discovered. But Luo Ange was not flustered at all. He felt that everyone would be asleep after midnight, and no one would come. However, just then, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside. They turned around and saw that many people were already standing outside the window. The two of them were stunned on the spot. Then Ji Xiang cried and told Luo Ange that they had been discovered and were done for. However, Luo Ange guessed that it was probably Mu Ku who had found them. The next second, the door of the imperial kitchen was kicked open, and Ji Xiang was so scared that he immediately knelt on the ground. The person who